Hello everyone, I am Uncle Joe, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Believe me, this story will put you to sleep in no time, because if anyone knows how to do that, it's me. Get comfortable and relax. In the kitchen, the cameras lurked, hidden behind the clock, concealed within the bathroom mirror, and even nestled among the houseplants. At first, I dismissed my unease as mere paranoia, but soon, the unsettling truth settled in. Someone had been observing my every move for days. What was meant to be a simple task, watching over my college roommate's parents' home, had turned into a chilling experience. We were on a 2-week European vacation. The pay was good, the house was nice, and I had plenty of time to work on my thesis. Win-win, right? Wrong. The first few days were uneventful. I settled into a routine. Wake up, make coffee, work on my laptop for a few hours, maybe take a swim in the backyard pool if the weather was nice. Pretty cushy, all things considered. But on the 4th night, a strange feeling crept in, as if unseen eyes were upon me. I would sit on the couch, engrossed in my reading, only to be struck by an inexplicable urge to glance over my shoulder. As I stood there, perhaps in the shower, I couldn't shake the sensation of movement lurking just beyond the curtain. I attributed it to the unease of being alone in an unfamiliar home. Nothing more than nerves, I thought. Yet, that feeling lingered, intensifying with each passing day. Then came the moment of discovery. While diligently dusting the mantel, I noticed something peculiar about one of the family photos. The frame appeared thicker than the rest. Intrigued, I lifted it for a closer look, and there it was. A tiny lens, no larger than a pin, hidden away, watching silently. In the dim light, a head lurked in the corner of the frame, sending a chill racing through my veins as the truth dawned upon me. All those fleeting moments of discomfort suddenly crystallized into a haunting clarity. My heart raced as I began to scour the house with newfound urgency. Within the next hour, I uncovered 6 more hidden cameras, their unblinking lenses watching from every corner. The living room, the kitchen, my bedroom, even the bathroom. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure that every inch of this house was under their watchful gaze. But the questions gnawed at me. Why? And more importantly, who? I contemplated calling the police, but what could I possibly say to convey the depth of my fear? In a quiet house, I stumbled upon some cameras, their presence a mystery. Perhaps the homeowners had placed them for security, though their clever concealment made that seem improbable. Yet, I couldn't dismiss the possibility entirely. I knew I needed to gather more information before bringing the authorities into this unsettling situation. So, I spent the following day maintaining an air of normalcy, all the while crafting a careful plan. I went through my usual routine, ensuring that my discovery remained hidden, while I meticulously cataloged everything I had uncovered. As the shadows deepened, I sought the hidden patterns in the dim light. Most of the cameras appeared to be wireless, likely sending their signals to a receiver lurking nearby. If I could uncover that receiver, perhaps I could follow the trail back to the unseen watcher. With the night settling in, I set my plan into motion. I flicked on every television and radio in the house, turning the volume up high, creating a cacophony that would cloak my movements. I began my careful search, room by room, starting in the basement, meticulously examining every corner and crevice. Cranny nothing. The first floor yielded similar results. By the time I reached the 2nd floor, I was starting to lose hope. That's when I noticed the attic access panel in the hallway ceiling. It was slightly ajar, barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. Bingo, heart racing. I pulled down the folding ladder as quietly as I could. Each creak of the old wood sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. What would I find up there? More importantly, would someone be waiting? I ascended slowly, my senses on high alert. The attic was dark, musty, and filled with the usual assortment of boxes and old furniture. But there in the far corner, I noticed a faint blue glow creeping forward. I discovered what I was searching for: a laptop connected to a series of small monitors. Each screen displayed a different room of the house. I observed myself on one of them, standing in the attic, illuminated by the eerie electronic light. I had found the surveillance hub. Now, I just needed to uncover its owner. The laptop was, of course, password protected. I wasn't a hacker, but I knew enough to check most of the browser history had been cleared, yet a few entries lingered, sending a chill through my veins as I read them. Multiple searches for my name, social media profiles, university records. Whoever was behind this was not merely observing the house. They were watching me specifically. Suddenly, I heard a car door slam outside, and panic gripped me. I hurried to the attic window and peered out, spotting a dark figure approaching the house. I had to escape, and quickly. I scrambled down the attic ladder, disregarding the noise I made, my mind solely focused on fleeing. I dashed toward As I stood there, I grabbed my phone and wallet, making my way toward the stairs. It was then that I heard the front door creak open, and I froze, 1 foot poised on the top step. Heavy footsteps echoed from the entryway, slow and deliberate, as if they were aware of my presence. My mind raced. The back door was locked, and I knew I wouldn't make it in time to any of the windows. I was trapped on the 2nd floor. The footsteps began their ascent up the stairs. In a moment of desperation, I ducked into the master bedroom and locked the door. It wouldn't hold them for long, but perhaps it would buy me enough time to think. I could hear deep breath and steadied myself on the windowsill, feeling the cool night air wrap around me like a shroud. Below, the backyard loomed, a shadowy expanse with the promise of escape. My heart raced as I spotted the sloped roof, a narrow path to safety. The doorknob rattled ominously, followed by a resounding thud that echoed through the stillness. Time was slipping away like sand through my fingers. With a final glance back, I let instinct guide me, sliding down the roof, hoping to reach the pool unscathed, as the door shuddered under the weight of whatever was on the other side. With a deep breath, I allowed myself to descend, the roughness of the roof tiles scraping against my skin as I slid down, desperately attempting to regain control. I struck the gutter with a jolt, flipping over the edge and plunging the final few feet into the pool below. The cold water enveloped me, the shock stealing the breath from my lungs. For a fleeting moment, I floated there, stunned by the sudden chill. Then instinct took over. I swam to the edge, pulling myself out, gasping and coughing. The shouts from inside the house echoed around me. They knew I had escaped. Soaking wet and shivering, I stood there, caught between the thrill of freedom and the looming shadows of what lay ahead. As I dashed for the back fence, I managed to scramble over it just as the back door burst open. Flashlight beams sliced through the darkness behind me, urging me to run harder than I ever had before. I raced through backyards, down alleyways, and across streets with no destination in mind, only an overwhelming need to distance myself from that house. Eventually, I found refuge in a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. The waitress cast me a concerned glance as I stumbled in, dripping wet and wild. I must have been quite a sight. "Are you all right?" she asked, already reaching for the phone. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. "I need to call the police." The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements. I recounted everything to the officers. The cameras, the attic, the intruder. They seemed skeptical at first, but perhaps something in my demeanor convinced them I was telling the truth. A team was dispatched to the house, and they found the cameras and the surveillance equipment in the attic, just as I had described. Yet, of the intruder there was no sign. Whoever it was had vanished into the night. Something that had been watching me had vanished into the night. The owners of the house, now far away in Europe, insisted they knew nothing of the events that had unfolded. The investigation, they said, was ongoing, though it might take some time before any real answers emerged. In the meantime, I was left to gather the fragments of my shattered sense of security. I moved in with a friend, unable to bear the thought of solitude. Every unexpected noise made me jump, and I flinched at every flicker of light. Sleep became a rare luxury, and the worst of it all was, in the stillness of the night, a question echoed in my mind, casting shadows over my thoughts. Why me? What had drawn the attention of such a meticulous plan? Were they still lurking in the darkness, biding their time for another chance? The sense of safety I once knew feels like a distant memory, replaced by a world that seems cloaked in deeper shades of fear, filled with hidden threats and watchful gazes. Yet here I stand, having survived the ordeal. Whatever lies ahead, I will confront it with courage, for the trials we endure only serve to fortify our spirits. I can only hope that I won't have to put that belief to the test again, especially when I caught sight of his thumb protruding ominously in the shadows. From the ragged sleeve of his jacket, I felt a pull, a whisper urging me to stop despite knowing I should have kept driving. The rain poured down in sheets, and something in his eyes held me captive. That decision would linger in my mind, haunting me for the rest of my days. It was just past midnight, and I was returning home from a long shift at the hospital. The highway lay before me, empty and shrouded in darkness, visibility reduced to mere feet ahead of my headlights. I was weary, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that follows 12 hours spent tending to the emergencies of others. Perhaps that was why I hesitated, noticed the sign sooner. I saw him standing on the shoulder, his form barely visible through the downpour. He was soaked to the skin, his clothes clinging to his thin frame. As I slowed down, he turned towards me, his face lighting up with hope. I rolled down the passenger window a crack. "Where you headed?" I called out over the sound of rain hammering on my car roof. "Just down the road a ways," he replied, his voice surprisingly soft. "My car broke down, and I'm trying to get to the next town. I'd be real grateful for a ride." I hesitated. For a fleeting moment, every instinct urged me to drive away, leaving the stranger behind in the shadows of my rearview mirror. Yet, the relentless rain showed no signs of easing, and I couldn't bear the thought of abandoning someone in such dire conditions. "Hop in," I said, unlocking the door. He slid into the passenger seat, bringing with him the scent of damp clothes and something elusive that lingered in the air. "Thanks, man," he said, flashing a grateful smile. "You're a lifesaver." I eased back onto the road, the windshield wipers working tirelessly against the deluge. "I'm James," I offered, as the storm raged on outside. In an attempt to break the stillness that had enveloped us, John spoke, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "I really appreciate this. Not many people would stop on a night like this." We continued our journey in silence for a few moments, the rhythmic swish of the wipers the only sound accompanying us. I stole glances at John when I could. He appeared younger than I had first assumed, likely in his mid-20s. His clothes, though worn, were clean, and he possessed an almost boyish charm. "So, what happened to your car?" I asked, more to fill the silence than out of genuine curiosity. Real curiosity lingered in the air as JN shrugged, the old piece of junk finally giving up the ghost. I had hoped to reach my sister's place, but he trailed off, staring out the window at the rain-slicked darkness. Something about his story felt off, though I couldn't quite grasp why. I chalked it up to my exhaustion and concentrated on the road ahead. We had been driving for about 20 minutes when John spoke again. "Mind if we take a little detour? There's a turnoff coming up that'll get us there quicker." I frowned, recalling my earlier thoughts. "You mentioned you were headed to the next town, right? My sister lives just outside it, and this way is faster, trust me." Against my better judgment, I took the exit he indicated. The road narrowed, winding through the dense forest, and the rain seemed to intensify. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I asked, anxiety beginning to gnaw at the edges of my mind. John nodded, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Just a little further, we drove on, the trees pressing in on either side. I was about to suggest turning back when John suddenly said, "Pull over." As I eased the car to a stop, the rain drummed softly against the windshield, blurring the world outside into a murky canvas of trees and shadows. In this desolate place, silence enveloped me, and the words I wanted to speak faded into the stillness. A chill crept over me, a sensation that something was amiss, and then I felt it, a cold, hard pressure against my ribs. Turning slowly, I met John's gaze, his earlier warmth replaced by a chilling intensity. "Turn off the engine and give me the keys," he commanded, his voice a low whisper that sent shivers down my spine. My heart raced, each beat echoing in the confined space, and with trembling hands, I complied. "Now get out of the car," he instructed, and as I opened the door, the sound of the rain seemed to grow louder, drowning out everything else. The rain fell heavier as I ventured into the downpour, John trailing behind, the knife glinting ominously in his grip. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling like the leaves in the wind. He smiled, but it was a far cry from the warm grin he had shown me before. This was the smile of a predator, sharp and unsettling. "Everything you've got for starters: wallet, phone, watch. Then we're gonna take a little walk." With my heart racing, I surrendered my belongings, the weight of the storm pressing down on us. We were miles from anywhere, lost in the tempest, and even if I found the strength to fight back, where would I go? "Go," John gestured with the knife towards the trees. "Start walking." I trudged through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face, mud sucking at my shoes. The rain had soaked through my clothes in seconds, leaving me shivering and miserable. John followed close behind, occasionally prodding me with the knife to keep me moving. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, we came to a small clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated cabin, its windows dark and empty. John ordered, giving me a rough shove towards it. The door creaked open, revealing the interior of the cabin, which was steeped in a musty dampness. Moldy furniture loomed in the dim light, and the wallpaper hung in tatters, whispering tales of neglect. A battery-powered lantern flickered on a rickety table, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. "Sit," John instructed, gesturing to a chair in the corner. As I sank into its embrace, he produced a length of rope from a duffel bag I had overlooked. "Hands behind your back," he commanded, and as he secured me to the chair, a chill ran down my spine. I finally found my voice, trembling as I asked, "Why are you doing this?" John finished the knot with a practiced ease and stepped back, his cold eyes locking onto mine. "Why does anyone do anything?" he replied, a hint of darkness in his tone. "Money, power, survival, take your pick." He began pacing the small room, twirling the knife between his fingers with a skill that was unsettling. "You see, James, it's James, right? I found that people like you, good Samaritans, are the easiest to manipulate. You're so eager to help, so trusting. It makes my job so much simpler." "Your job?" I echoed, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. He grinned, a predatory smile that made my stomach churn. "Oh yes, this isn't my first rodeo, as they say. But don't worry, you're not special. Just another pawn in the game." In a dimly lit room, the air thick with tension, I found myself in a predicament that felt all too familiar. My thoughts raced, pondering how many others had faced a similar fate, caught in the web of good intentions gone awry. "What are you going to do with me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. John, leaning casually against the wall, regarded me with an unsettling calmness. "That depends on you," he replied, a hint of amusement in his tone. "You see, I've devised a little plan. First, we'll contact your bank and have you transfer all your funds to an account I control. Then we'll tackle your credit cards and loans. Anything we can extract from you." He paused, fixing me with a gaze that sent chills down my spine. "After that, Well, that's where the real story begins. As the shadows deepened, a choice loomed before me, heavy with consequence. I could vanish, slip away to a distant place, leaving behind the echoes of this moment, or I could let the unspoken threat linger, feeling the gravity of my predicament settle upon me. This man, with his chilling demeanor, was poised to unravel my life, and I found myself powerless against it. It was as if he could sense my turmoil. A low chuckle escaped his lips. "Don't entertain any notions of heroism," he warned, his voice a sinister whisper. "Even if you somehow escape, and trust me, you won't. These woods will swallow you whole before you find your way out." The darkness seemed to close in, amplifying the dread that wrapped around my heart. As I turned away, rummaging through the duffel bag, I seized the moment to test my bonds. They were tight, expertly tied, leaving no room for an easy escape. Just then, Jan turned back, my phone in hand, and said, "Let's get started. Shall we? What's your bank's number?" What followed was a chilling ordeal of paperwork and phone calls, all under the looming threat of John's knife. I watched, helpless, as my life savings slipped away, credit cards maxed out, and loans taken out in my name. With each transaction, I felt a piece of my very essence fade away. As the future slipped away, I found myself emotionally and physically drained by the time it was over. John, however, seemed quite pleased, humming softly to himself as he packed away the paperwork and my lifeless phone. "Well, James," he said, his tone almost casual, "I have to say you've been a model hostage." There was a hint of regret in his voice, as if he almost felt sorry for what was to come next. He approached me, knife in hand, and for a fleeting moment, I was convinced this was the end. But instead of ending it all, he cut the ropes that bound me to the chair. "Remember what I said about choices?" he asked, stepping back. "Well, here's yours. That door opens into the woods. If fortune smiles upon you, perhaps you will find your way back to civilization." He gestured toward the knife resting on the table. "You could attempt to fight your way out, but I wouldn't advise it." With that, he picked up the duffel bag and made his way to the door. "Oh, and James, if I were you, I'd wait at least an hour before leaving, just to be safe." And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the cabin, accompanied only by the sound of the rain and the heavy silence of what had just transpired. It's hard to say how long I remained there, feeling numb and shivering in the darkness. When I finally found the courage to step out into the rain, the sky was beginning to brighten with the first whispers of dawn. It took me 6 long hours to navigate my way back to the road, and by that time, John had vanished, taking my car and every trace of my identity with him. The police offered their sympathy, but their optimism was thin. They explained that men like John were skilled at slipping away unnoticed. Now, months later, I find myself grappling with the aftermath. My credit is in shambles, my savings have disappeared, and I flinch at every shadow, startled by even the smallest act of kindness. Yet here I am, still breathing, and slowly, I am finding my way back to myself. Rebuilding, I've come to understand a profound truth. Sometimes, the most perilous predators wear familiar faces. The forest, once my sanctuary, a place to find solace and embrace the beauty of nature, transformed into a haunting nightmare that would linger in my mind for years. I could never have foreseen that a mere camping trip would spiral into a desperate struggle for survival against an invisible foe hidden among the trees. It all began innocently. The weight of work had been pressing down on me, and I was burning the candle at both ends. For months, I had been immersed in a significant project, and when it finally came to a close, I felt the need to unwind. The idea of a solo camping trip in the Rocky Mountains emerged as the perfect remedy. Just me, my tent, and endless stretches of untouched wilderness. While I had camped many times before, it had always been with friends or in organized groups. This would be my first true venture into solitude, a thought that stirred both excitement and a hint of apprehension within me. I chose a secluded spot, a day's hike from the nearest ranger station. It was early autumn, and the leaves were just beginning to turn, creating a beautiful tapestry of colors. The forest was adorned in brilliant shades of red and gold, the air crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and wild herbs. The hike in was uneventful, though more challenging than I had anticipated. By the time I reached my chosen campsite, a small clearing near a babbling stream, my muscles ached pleasantly from the exertion. I set up camp, started a small fire, and settled in to watch the sunset, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. That first night passed peacefully. I slept better than I had in weeks, lulled by the gentle sounds of nature, of the gentle sounds of the forest. The next morning I woke early, eager to explore my surroundings. I spent the day hiking, taking photos, and simply soaking in the tranquility of nature. It was exactly what I needed, a complete disconnect from the chaos of everyday life. As evening approached, I made my way back to camp, looking forward to another night under the stars. That's when things started to go wrong. As I neared my campsite, I noticed something odd. The air smelled different. There was an acrid tinge to it, almost chemical. It reminded cleaning supplies we used at work lay completely out of place in the heart of the wilderness. I slowed my pace, a sense of unease creeping in. The forest, usually alive with the chorus of birds and insects, felt unnaturally quiet. Every instinct within me was alert, whispering that something was amiss. I approached my camp with caution, my eyes scanning the trees for any sign of disturbance. At first glance, everything appeared normal. My tent stood undisturbed. My gear lay where I had left it. But then, I noticed it, a set of fresh footprints in the soft earth. As I sat by my fire pit, a sense of unease washed over me. My heart quickened. It was clear someone had been here in my absence. But who could it be, and what were their intentions? Just as I contemplated packing up and leaving, faint voices drifted through the air, growing steadily closer. Instinctively, I crouched behind a large fallen log, peering cautiously through the underbrush. Two figures emerged from the trees on the far side of the clearing. Clad in dark clothing, heavy boots, and gloves, they carried large duffel bags, moving with a purpose that suggested they were well acquainted with the terrain. "This looks good," one of them said, dropping his bag with a metallic clank, far enough from the main trails but still accessible. The other man nodded, scanning the area. His gaze passed over my hidden position, and I held my breath, willing myself to become invisible. "Let's get set up," he said. "We need to be operational by nightfall." They began unpacking their bags, and my blood ran cold as I saw what they contained. Chemical jugs, tubing, hot plates, all the components of a mobile drug lab. I had stumbled upon a meth cooking operation in the middle of the woods. In the heart of the national forest, a sense of urgency gripped me. I knew I had to escape to find help, yet I felt ensnared, every slight movement threatening to betray my hiding place. The men nearby were ruthless, and I had no doubt they would eliminate any witnesses to their clandestine activities. So I remained still, barely daring to breathe, as they meticulously set up their lab. The acrid scent of chemicals filled the air, stinging my nostrils, while I observed their chilling efficiency. These were not mere amateurs. This was a well-orchestrated operation. Hours slipped by, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, long shadows stretched across the clearing, leaving me stiff and tense from my stillness. Motionless for what felt like an eternity, my muscles cried out for relief, yet the fear of being discovered held me captive in the shadows. As the full darkness enveloped the scene, more figures emerged. 5 in total, each bearing a hard, dangerous demeanor. They spoke in hushed tones, their conversation weaving through the air like a chilling breeze, discussing routes and meeting points that hinted at a significant drug trafficking operation. In an attempt to ease the cramp in my leg, I must have shifted ever so slightly, and a twig snapped beneath me, the sound piercing the stillness of the night. In that instant, everyone in the clearing froze, the tension thick enough to cut through the darkness. "What was that?" one of the men asked, his hand instinctively moving to his waistband, where the outline of a gun was visible. "Probably just an animal," another replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "Check it out," the first man ordered. "We can't take any chances." Two of them began moving in my direction, their flashlights sweeping through the underbrush. I knew I couldn't remain hidden for long. It was only a matter of time before they discovered me. I had to run. Taking a deep breath, I burst from my hiding spot, sprinting toward the trees on the far side of the clearing. Shouts echoed behind me, accompanied by the relentless sound of footsteps drawing closer. I dashed through the forest, branches clawing at my face, roots lurking beneath the surface, eager to trip me with every hurried step. The pursuers were gaining ground, familiar with these woods, their movements fluid and unencumbered by the fatigue of hiding. Suddenly, a gunshot shattered the night, the bullet whistling past my ear to lodge itself in a nearby tree. The sharp sound propelled me forward, adrenaline surging through my veins. I had no plan, no destination, only the instinct to escape. As I sought to distance myself from those men, a sense of urgency gripped me. I understood that I couldn't run indefinitely. I needed to find a place to conceal myself, a way to mislead them. Ahead, the terrain dipped, and the soothing sound of rushing water beckoned. The stream I had once camped beside must eventually swell into a river. Driven by desperation, I veered toward that sound, pushing my weary body to its limits. The shouts behind me grew louder, and the crack of a shot echoed, alarmingly closer. Then, as if fate intervened, the trees parted before me. At the edge of a cliff, I found myself gazing down, perhaps 30 feet to the river below, swollen and frothy from recent rains, shimmering in the moonlight. The tension in the air was palpable as another bullet ricocheted off the rocks near my feet. Without a moment's hesitation, I leaped into the abyss. The fall felt eternal, a fleeting moment stretched into infinity, until I plunged into the icy water, the shock stealing the breath from my lungs. The current seized me, tumbling me in its relentless grip. I fought my way to the surface, gasping for air, and then surrendered to the flow, using the last remnants of my strength to keep my head above the rushing water. Time slipped away from me as I floated in the river, minutes or perhaps hours blending into one another. Eventually, the current began to ease, and I found the strength to pull myself onto a pebble beach. There, I lay for what felt like an eternity, shivering and coughing up water, too weary to move. When I finally gathered the courage to stand, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. I had no idea where I was. My clothes clung to me, soaked through, and I was devoid of supplies, utterly lost in the wilderness. Yet, amidst the confusion, a flicker of hope remained. I was alive and free from those men. With a deep breath, I chose a direction and began to walk, trusting that if I followed the river, it would lead me somewhere safe. As I made my way downstream, civilization seemed a distant promise. 2 arduous days of hiking, foraging for berries, and sipping from the cool river water finally led me to a hiking trail. From there, it took another day to reach the ranger station. The rangers, taken aback by my disheveled appearance and the tale I spun, quickly summoned the state police and DA agents. A massive manhunt was set in motion. Yet, by the time they arrived at the site I had described, the drug operation had vanished like a whisper in the night. All that remained were traces, discarded chemical containers and trampled undergrowth. But the men had slipped away into the shadows. Vanished in the months that followed, I gave countless statements to various law enforcement agencies. My information helped them piece together details of a large-scale meth distribution network operating in the national forests of the Pacific Northwest. Several arrests were made, but the main players, the men I'd seen that night, were never caught. I still go camping, but never alone. The forest that was once my sanctuary now holds a darker edge. Every snapping twig, every unexpected shadow sends my heart racing. I know logically that the chances of encountering those men again are slim, yet reason holds little sway over the haunting memories of that dreadful night. Occasionally, in my dreams, I find myself fleeing through those shadowy woods, the echo of footsteps trailing closely behind. I awaken, breathless, sheets twisted around me, the acrid scent of chemicals lingering in my nostrils. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but I find myself questioning that notion. Still, I hold on to this truth. I survived, and each day that follows is a precious gift I cherish deeply. The forest revealed a stark truth about the shadows that can hide in the most enchanting of places. Yet, it also unveiled a strength within me that I had never recognized before, and for that, I hold a sense of gratitude. The first call arrived at 1:17 a.m. I recall a time when I found myself fixated on the clock, hoping the hands would race forward, each tick bringing me closer to the end of my shift. I should have known better than to answer that call, yet I did, and that's when the unsettling tale began. My name is Noah, and I find myself working the graveyard shift at KXYZ, a humble radio station nestled in the heart of nowhere. In Colorado, the nights often unfold with a familiar rhythm, playing tunes, taking requests, and battling the gentle pull of sleep. Yet this night was different. It began like any other shift as I arrived just past midnight, ready to take over from the evening DJ. I nestled into my space for 6 hours of classic rock, with the occasional caller eager to hear their cherished song. The studio, modest in size, housed a soundboard, a couple of monitors, and a window overlooking the stillness of the empty parking lot. It may not have been grand, but it was my sanctuary from midnight until the dawn's first light. Once upon a time, in the stillness of the night, shadows danced and whispers filled the air, beckoning the curious to listen closely. The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow, as tales of the unknown began to unfold, each word a gentle invitation to explore the mysteries that lingered in the dark. The first couple of hours drifted by without a whisper of disturbance. I filled the air with the familiar sounds of Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and Bob Seger, interspersed with the occasional local ad and weather update. It was a tranquil night, even by our standards. No calls, no requests, just me and the music. Then, at precisely 1:17 a.m., the stillness began to shift. The request line flickered to life, and I greeted the caller with my familiar introduction. "You're live on KXYZ. What can I play for you tonight?" A stillness enveloped the line, and just as I was ready to dismiss it as a prank, I detected a sound. A slow, measured breathing. "Hello!" I ventured into the quiet. Feeling a touch uneasy, I heard a man's voice, low and almost a whisper, with an unusual quality that lingered in the air. "Anyone there? Play something for me," he said. I tried to keep my tone light. "Sure thing. What would you like to hear?" "Surprise me," he replied, and then the line went silent. I shrugged it off. Late-night callers often have their quirks, and this was far from the strangest request I'd encountered. I queued up Hotel California by the Eagles and returned to scrolling through my phone. 15 minutes later, the phone rang again, the same unsettling tone echoing in the stillness of the night. "Number WKRP, what can I do for you?" I answered, and the voice replied, "You've got good taste." It was the same guy. I was sure of it. "What else can you play for me?" A chill ran down my spine. Something about his tone made me uneasy. Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Any preferences?" "I trust your judgment," he said, and hung up again. Now I was starting to get freaked out. I looked out the window, half expecting to see someone standing in the parking lot, watching me, but it was empty, just my beat-up Honda sitting under the flickering streetlight. As the last notes of Stairway to Heaven faded into the stillness, I found myself seeking solace in its familiar embrace, a gentle balm for my frayed nerves. Just then, the phone rang, slicing through the quiet. I stared at it, my hand hovering over the receiver, caught in a moment of hesitation. A part of me longed to let it ring, to allow the caller to fade into the shadows of the night. But duty tugged at me, reminding me that I must answer, no matter how unsettling the atmosphere felt. WKRP, I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. The man on the other end spoke with a different tone this time, harder, more intense. I can see why people listen to you, he said, his words wrapping around me like a chilling breeze. The way you choose the songs, the way you speak, it's captivating. My heart raced, caught in the web of his unsettling admiration. Chills ran down my spine as I asked, "Who is this?" His chuckle echoed in the darkness, a sound that sent shivers through me. "Just a fan, Noah. A very dedicated fan. How did he know my name?" We had always hidden behind our playful DJ personas. Mine was the night owl. I steadied my voice, trying to sound resolute. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but this isn't funny. Please don't call again." "Oh, but I will," he replied, his voice dripping with menace. "I'm closer than you think, Noah. I'm watching." The line went dead, and my hands trembled as I set the phone down, glancing nervously around the room. In the small studio, an unsettling sensation crept in, as the windows that once offered a sense of openness now loomed like great vulnerabilities. It felt as though anyone could be lurking outside, their gaze fixed upon me, hidden from view. I attempted to dismiss the thought, rationalizing that perhaps it was merely some miscreant seeking amusement by unsettling the late-night DJ. Yet, the feeling of being watched clung to me, an unwelcome companion. The hours slipped by in a haze of unease. Every sound made me flinch, and I found myself peering into the darkness at every flicker of shadow. The phone remained eerily silent, amplifying the tension in the air, as if it too was holding its breath. The anticipation grew heavier, wrapping around me like a thick fog at 3:02 a.m. It rang again, and I answered without a word. "You should be more careful, Noah," the voice said, calm and almost soothing, which somehow made it all the more terrifying. "You never know who might be listening or watching. What do you want?" I whispered. "To play a game," he replied. "It's simple. I'll give you a choice of songs to play. If you choose correctly, nothing happens. Choose wrong, and, well, let's just say the consequences will be unpleasant." My mind was reeling. Couldn't be happening. Things like this don't happen in real life, only in movies or crime novels. Yet the fear I felt was undeniably real. "I'm hanging up now," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm calling the police." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he replied, his tone suddenly icy. "Not if you want your sister to remain safe." My heart stopped. "What did you say?" "Emily, isn't it? Lives over on Cedar Street. Cute little house with blue shutters. It would be a shame if something happened to her." Panic surged through me. How did he know about Emily? How did he know where she lived? "Leave her out of this," I said, my voice trembling. "That's up to you, Noah. Play the game and everyone stays safe. Refuse and, well, I think you understand." I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself this had to be a bluff. There was no way he could actually hurt Emily, but could I really take that chance? "Fine," I said, feeling defeated. "What's the game?" "Excellent," he purred. "Let's start easy. Sympathy for the devil or House of the Rising Sun?" I thought frantically. Was there a right answer? Was he looking for something specific? Was there something specific behind it all? Or was this merely a part of his twisted game? "House of the Rising Sun," I finally said, and a pause stretched out, feeling like an eternity. "Good choice," he replied at last. "Play it now." With trembling hands, I queued up the song. As the notes began to fill the air, I realized I was holding my breath. "Very good, Noah," the voice said when I picked up the phone again. "You're a natural at this game." Shall we try another? And so it continued for the next 2 hours. He would call, present me with a choice of songs, and I would have to decide. Sometimes, he would offer cryptic clues, deepening the mystery of our eerie exchange. At other moments, it felt entirely unpredictable, yet I remained keenly aware that a single misstep could lead to dire outcomes as the clock struck 5 a.m. As I approached, a wave of nerves washed over me. My shirt clung to my skin, damp with sweat, and my hands trembled so fiercely that the soundboard felt like a foreign object. Yet, I had navigated this journey without faltering thus far. The phone rang one last time, and a voice emerged, calm yet eerie. "You've done well, Noah," it said, a hint of admiration lacing its tone. "But now it's time for the final round. Get this right and it all ends. Get it wrong and, well, I think you know what awaits." As I stood there, I felt a heaviness in my chest, a moment suspended in time. The choice loomed before me, a haunting echo of two songs, each whispering their own tales of mortality. I swallowed hard, grappling with the weight of my decision. Was it mere coincidence that both melodies danced around the theme of death? Or was there a deeper connection I was missing? My thoughts spiraled, searching for hidden meanings in the shadows. In that stillness, I chose to trust my instincts. "Stairway to Heaven," I murmured, my voice barely breaking the silence. The stillness that followed enveloped me, stretching out like a dark, endless night. My heart thudded loudly in my ears, and I felt the chill of sweat tracing down my back, a reminder of the gravity of my choice. At last, he spoke, "Congratulations, Noah, you've won the game." A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it felt almost painful. "It's over?" I asked, hardly daring to believe it. "For now," he replied, and I could sense the smile in his voice. "You've proven to be a worthy opponent. I look forward to our next game." The line went dead for the final time. I sat there, stunned, as the first rays of dawn began to creep through the window. The night was over, but I knew the nightmare was far from ended. Whoever this man was, whatever game he was playing, I had a sinking feeling washed over me, a sense that this was merely the beginning. As I signed off and the morning DJ took over, I couldn't shake the unsettling sensation of being watched. I hurried to my car, glancing over my shoulder with every step. Once home, I called Emily, relieved when her sleepy voice greeted me. She was fine, blissfully unaware of the night's eerie happenings. I chose not to share the details. How could I? It all felt so surreal in the daylight. Yet, as I finally crawled into bed, exhausted and on edge, one certainty lingered in my mind. In that dimly lit radio booth, a sense of unease settled over me, as if the very walls whispered secrets of the night. Somewhere beyond the glass, a man with a voice that sent shivers down my spine was lurking, plotting his next move in a game I had never consented to join. As the next evening approached, I felt a tremor in my hands as I reached for the studio door, the phone sitting there like a silent specter, a reminder of the lurking threat. I found myself questioning, once again, the path I had chosen, yet deep within, I understood that it was futile. He had discovered me once, and he could do so again. It seemed that the game was far from over, and as I pushed aside that old door, I braced myself for whatever awaited me in the shadows. As I stood there, paintbrush in hand, a tiny red light blinked back at me, and in that moment, I understood that my life was about to change forever. What I had envisioned as a charming fixer-upper was on the brink of transforming into my own personal house of horrors. I had always dreamed of owning a home, a sanctuary where I could plant my roots and truly make it my own. When I stumbled upon the listing for the old Victorian on Oak Street, it felt almost too good to be true. The price was surprisingly low for the area, and despite its evident need for some tender, loving care, the bones of the house were undeniably solid. A real estate agent, a lively woman named Karen, seemed almost too enthusiastic to finalize the deal. In hindsight, I should have recognized that as a warning sign, but the allure of finally having a place to call my own clouded my judgment. The day I moved in was a flurry of boxes, furniture, and eager plans for all the renovations I envisioned. It wasn't until that evening, as I prepared to settle in for my first night in the new house, that I sensed something unusual. While hanging a mirror in the hallway, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something lurking behind one of the... In the dim light of the room, I noticed the old paintings left by the previous owner. Curiosity tugged at me, prompting me to take one down. As I did, my gaze fell upon a small blinking red light embedded in the wall. At first, I dismissed it as an outdated security system, but as I leaned in closer, a chill crept over me. It was a camera, a very small, very modern camera. My heart began to race as I felt an unsettling presence. I ventured further into the house, and in the living room, I discovered another camera cleverly hidden in a vent. In the kitchen, one was tucked behind the microwave, and even in the bathroom, I stumbled upon a tiny lens watching me. Each find deepened the sense of unease that wrapped around me like a shadow. As I peered out from behind the mirror, a chill crept down my spine. By the time I concluded my search, I had uncovered no fewer than 12 hidden cameras scattered throughout the house. The realization struck me like a punch to the gut. Someone had been watching me. Given the placement of some of these devices, they had witnessed the most intimate moments of my life. A wave of violation washed over me, leaving me feeling exposed and utterly terrified. Who could have done this? Was it the previous owner, the real estate agent, or perhaps someone else entirely? Someone I didn't even know who had access to my most private moments. My hands trembled as I grappled with the unsettling truth. With trembling hands, I reached for the phone and called the police. They arrived swiftly, and I guided them through the house, pointing out each camera I had discovered. The officers wore grim expressions as they meticulously documented everything. They informed me that a specialist would need to be brought in to remove the cameras and analyze them for any clues about the person who might have installed them. As they worked, I found myself sitting on the front porch, trying to process the whirlwind of events. The home I had been so excited about just hours earlier now felt tainted, an unsettling sense of danger lingering in the air. My mind raced with thoughts of all the things I had done, each memory now shadowed by an eerie uncertainty. Since moving in, I couldn't shake the feeling that all my private moments might have been captured and viewed by God knows who. The police wrapped up their initial investigation around midnight, advising me to find somewhere else to stay for the night while they continued to process the scene. I nodded numbly, threw some clothes in a bag, and drove to a nearby hotel. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind racing with questions and fears. Who was watching me? What did they want? And most terrifyingly, were they still out there? The next morning, I met with a detective. At the police station, there stood a woman named Rodriguez, her stern appearance softened by kind eyes that seemed to hold a world of understanding. "Miss Smith," she began, her voice steady and clear, "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The situation is serious. The cameras we found in your home are high-end, professionally installed. This wasn't the work of some amateur with a hobby. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." A chill ran down my spine as I felt my stomach drop. "Do you know who it was?" I asked, my heart heavy with dread. Detective Rodriguez shook her head slowly. "Not yet, but we're working on it. We've gathered the property records and are delving into the history of everyone who has entered the house over the past few years. Previous owners, real estate agents, maintenance workers." She paused, her gaze steady and serious. "In the meantime, I must ask, is there anyone who might wish to keep an eye on you? An ex-partner, perhaps? Someone with whom you've had difficulties?" I shook my head, a hint of offense creeping in at the suggestion. "No, nothing like that. I'm quite boring, honestly. I can't fathom why anyone would want to spy on me." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. With a sense of calm, I shared my thoughts, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. "Very well," I said. "We'll continue our search, In the meantime, we had removed every camera we could locate, and a team would conduct another thorough sweep to ensure nothing was overlooked. "But Miss Smith," I added, my voice steady, "I must be candid with you. Your house is now classified as a crime scene, and it may be some time before you can return." I nodded, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, relief intertwined with despair. The thought of returning to that house, knowing the shadows that lingered there, was daunting. Yet it was still my home, a place where I had invested so much of myself. As I stepped out of the police station, a heavy weight settled in my chest. I had poured so much into my savings, weaving dreams and plans around it, and the thought of losing it felt like a shadow creeping closer. The world around me seemed to blur as I wandered aimlessly, searching for a place to belong. I found myself back at the hotel, staring at the bland walls and generic artwork, a stark reminder of my solitude. Days melted into weeks, and the police investigation trudged on. Yet they seemed no closer to uncovering the mystery of who had invaded my sanctuary. I drifted from one hotel to another, living out of a suitcase, seeking refuge in the spare rooms of friends who offered their sympathy. My life had become a restless journey, each moment steeped in uncertainty. On hold, the constant state of uncertainty began to weigh heavily upon me. It was during this unsettling period that I started to notice peculiar occurrences. Calls from unknown numbers would ring through, only to disconnect the moment I answered. A car appeared to be parked on my street, lingering there each time I passed by. Once, I could have sworn I glimpsed a figure watching me from my window, but when I turned to look again, they had vanished. I attempted to reassure myself that I was merely being paranoid, that the stress of the situation was distorting my perception. Yet the sensation of being observed, of being pursued, lingered long after the cameras were uncovered. About a month later, Detective Rodriguez summoned me for another meeting. The moment I laid eyes on her expression, I sensed that the news would not be favorable. "We've hit a dead end," she said, her voice laced with frustration. The cameras had been bought with cash from different electronic stores spanning 3 states. The installation had been carried out by professionals, yet we could find no trace of who might have done it, and the previous owners of the house seemed to be in the clear. There was an elderly couple who had moved to Florida, and their surprise mirrored your own. I felt the last flicker of hope fade away. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rodriguez let out a heavy sigh. "It means we don't have enough to go on. We'll keep the case open, of course, but I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith. I don't think we're going to be able to find who did this." I left the station in a daze. The thought that I might never uncover the identity of the one who had invaded my privacy, who had transformed my dream home into a haunting nightmare, weighed heavily on my mind. As I made my way back to my latest temporary lodging, a heavy weight settled upon me. A thought flickered in my mind. If the police were unable to uncover the truth, perhaps I could. After all, I was the one who had dwelled in that house, and I wondered if there was something I had overlooked, a clue that only I might recognize. That night, a decision took root within me. I would return to the house, not to reside there, for the thought of feeling safe again seemed a distant dream, but to seek out the answers that had slipped through the fingers of the authorities. The following day found me standing on the front porch of my former home, a place now shrouded in mystery. Key in hand, my heart pounded in my chest. It felt strange, as if I were breaking into someone else's home rather than entering my own. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was exactly as I had left it, yet somehow it felt completely different. The rooms that once brimmed with potential now seemed sinister, every shadow concealing possible threats. I moved through the house slowly, methodically, searching for anything out of place, anything that might offer a clue. In the master bedroom, I noticed something I hadn't before. There was a small James lay on the baseboard, easily overlooked if one wasn't paying attention. I knelt down to take a closer look and noticed a tiny arrow pointing towards the closet. With trembling hands, I opened the closet door. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but then, in the far back corner, I spotted a seam in the wall that didn't quite align. I pressed on it, and to my astonishment, a small panel popped open. Inside was a USB drive. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind swirling with questions. Should I take it to the police? Should I look at it myself? In the end, curiosity took hold of me, compelling me to take the drive and rush out of the house, a nagging sensation that I was being observed lingering in the air. Once back at my hotel room, I connected the drive to my laptop. What I discovered sent a chill through my veins. The drive was packed with video files, hundreds of them spanning years. They weren't solely of me. There were recordings of past owners, of strangers I didn't know, all captured in their private moments, blissfully unaware of the watchful lens. Yet, it was the most recent files that truly unsettled me. There was a folder that sent chills down my spine, marked with my name. Inside, it held videos not just from within my home, but from various places. Me at work, me shopping, me enjoying coffee with friends. The cameras in my house were merely the start. Whoever was behind this had been shadowing me, capturing my every move. The timestamps on the latest files revealed that they were still at it. I shut the laptop with a force that echoed my racing heart. I had hoped that uncovering the truth would bring me solace, but instead, I was engulfed in a deeper fear. The sense of violation was overwhelming. Confined to the house, it had seeped into every corner of my life. As I sat there, pondering my next move, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. With trembling hands, I opened it. The message was simple, yet it sent a chill through my veins. Enjoying the house? Emily? Don't worry, I'm still watching. Always watching. In that moment, I understood that this nightmare was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The moment I caught sight of his eyes in my rearview mirror, I knew I had made a grave mistake. What should have been a routine day had turned into something much darker. Delivery had transformed into a chilling ordeal, and here I was, ensnared in my own car with a man whose intentions were anything but kind. It was meant to be my final run of the night. For 6 months, I had been navigating the streets for DoorDash, hoping to earn a little extra to chip away at my student loans. Most nights passed in a blur of routine. Pick up the food, drop it off, and repeat. But this night, from the very beginning, felt different. The order arrived just as I was about to call it a night, directing me to a place I had never encountered before. A small, unassuming establishment on the fringes of town. The delivery address led me to a solitary house, nestled at the end of a long, winding road. I paused for a moment, a whisper of unease creeping into my thoughts, but the allure of a generous tip urged me onward. I should have heeded that quiet warning. The restaurant itself was a curious sight, a dilapidated shack adorned with flickering neon signs, its grimy windows obscuring whatever lay within. The man who handed me the food barely met my gaze, merely thrusting a greasy paper bag into my hands, accompanied by a grunt that could have been a greeting or perhaps something else entirely. On a tranquil night, I found myself driving toward a delivery address. The houses gradually diminished, becoming sparse as the road narrowed, winding through thick woods. My GPS, unreliable in this secluded area, faltered, leaving me to rely on the faint directions I had committed to memory. At last, I spotted it, a solitary mailbox bearing the correct number. The driveway stretched long and unpaved, leading to a house that stood far back from the road, shrouded in darkness. For a fleeting moment, I contemplated leaving the food at the end of the driveway, but the thought of that tip urged me to steady my nerves and continue onward. The house, old and imposing, loomed ahead. In a state of disrepair, the paint peeled away, and the shutters hung askew, with no cars in sight. I lingered in my car for a moment, weighing the decision to approach. It was then that I noticed a flicker of movement behind one of the darkened windows. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the food and stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my feet, each step toward the porch feeling heavier than the last. I rang the doorbell, the sound echoing through the stillness of the house. For a long moment, silence enveloped me, and then, slowly, the door creaked open. The man who answered stood tall and gaunt, his deep-set eyes holding a gaze that seemed to pierce through the shadows. Bore right through me as he smiled, though the warmth never reached his eyes. "Ah, my dinner has arrived," he said, his voice oddly formal. "Please come in. I'll get your payment." Every alarm bell in my head was ringing, yet I found myself stepping inside anyway. The interior of the house matched the outside, with peeling wallpaper and the musty scent of decay. The man vanished into another room, leaving me standing awkwardly in the entryway. I could hear him rummaging around, muttering to himself. That's when I noticed the photos on the wall. There were women, dozens of them, captured in what appeared to be candid shots. Some seemed taken from a distance, as if the subjects were unaware of the camera's gaze. A chill crept down my spine as I recognized that many of the photos featured delivery drivers still clad in their uniforms. I knew I had to escape that place immediately. As I turned to leave, the man suddenly appeared, blocking the door. The smile had vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. "But we haven't even had dinner yet." I tried to. As I pushed past him, I quickly realized he was stronger than he appeared. His grip tightened around my arm, firm and unyielding, as he spoke with an almost apologetic tone. "I'm afraid I can't let you go. You see, I've been waiting for someone like you for a very long time." What unfolded next became a blur in my memory. I recall the struggle, the screams, and the unsettling sound of something shattering. In a moment of sheer desperation, I managed to break free and flee. I could hear his heavy footsteps thudding against the old floorboards, echoing in the stillness. I burst out of the house and sprinted toward my car, fumbling with the keys. Just as I finally got the door open, I felt his hand gripped my shoulder, panic radiating from him. I spun around, my keys held tightly between my fingers, a makeshift weapon. I must have caught him off guard, for he stumbled back, granting me a fleeting moment to leap into my car and secure the doors. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I fumbled to insert the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as he crashed against my driver's side window. I slammed the car into reverse, tires spinning wildly on the gravel as I sped down the driveway, heart racing. For a brief moment, I believed I had escaped. As I turned onto the main road, a chill ran down my spine when I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. He was following me, his car gaining ground with alarming speed. The next hour unfolded like a nightmare, each moment stretching into eternity. I sped through the dark country roads, taking random turns in a desperate attempt to shake him off. But he remained right on my tail, sometimes pulling alongside me, intent on running me off the road. My phone was useless out here, no signal to call for help. I was utterly alone, the fuel gauge dipping dangerously low, with a madman in relentless pursuit. Just when despair threatened to consume me, I spotted lights ahead, a glimmer of hope in the enveloping darkness. In the stillness of the night, the gas station glowed like a beacon, its lights flickering against the darkness. I pulled into the parking lot, the sound of my horn piercing the quiet air, and hurriedly exited my car. The attendant, an older gentleman, looked up, surprise etched on his face as I rushed into the store. "Please," I gasped, "call the police. There's a man after me." Without hesitation, he reached for the phone and dialed 911. I turned to the window, my heart racing, as I saw my pursuer's car slow down, then speed past the gas station. For now, he was gone. The police arrived about 20 minutes later, and I recounted my story, detailing every moment of the chase. In a quiet town, a man found himself in a peculiar situation. The residents took his concerns to heart, especially when he spoke of the unsettling photos. They promised to look into it, but gently suggested he find refuge elsewhere for the night. So he settled into a motel on the far side of town, his mind racing, unable to find rest. Each car that rolled by sent a jolt through him, and every shadow seemed to whisper secrets of lurking dangers. The following day, a detective reached out, sharing the news that they had located the house, yet it stood empty, devoid of any trace of the man or the haunting images he had described. They assured him they would remain vigilant, keeping watch over the mystery that lingered in the air. Yet, without further evidence, there was little they could do. That day, I decided to leave my delivery job. The extra money simply wasn't worth the risk. As the weeks drifted by, and nothing seemed to happen, I found it impossible to shake the unsettling feeling of being watched. I would catch fleeting glimpses of a car that resembled his or notice a tall figure lurking at the edge of my vision, only to vanish when I turned to look. Perhaps it was merely paranoia, or maybe he had moved on to find another target. But in the stillness of the night, when the house lay quiet and shadows danced, I could still feel the weight of his gaze upon me. In the quiet moments, as I glance into the rearview mirror, a chill settles deep within me. I sense that he lingers, waiting, watching from the shadows. I've tried to leave it all behind, moved, changed my name, done everything in my power to vanish. Yet, on those late-night drives, when headlights loom behind me, a familiar panic rises in my throat. I can't help but wonder if tonight is the night he will find me once more. The truth is, some things are never truly escaped. The fear intertwines with your very being, a shadow that trails you relentlessly. Every stranger becomes a potential threat, and every dark road whispers of danger lurking just beyond the bend. In the quiet moments of my life, I find myself reflecting on the changes that have come over me. I've embraced new beginnings, a fresh job, new friendships, and even the thrill of dating again. Yet, I tread carefully, choosing public places for meetings and guarding the secret of my home. The shadows of my past linger, shaping my thoughts and actions in ways I'm still unraveling. I've become more vigilant, attuned to the world around me. Self-defense classes have become a part of my routine, and pepper spray is now a constant companion. Some may label my caution as paranoia, but I see it as a necessary shield. The most haunting aspect is the uncertainty, the lingering question of whether he still searches for me, and if I will ever find peace in the light of day. Each time my phone rings with an unknown number, or when a delivery arrives, or when I spot a car that resembles his, a familiar rush of fear washes over me. Yet, I stand resolute, determined not to let him claim victory over my life. I refuse to dwell in a constant state of fear. So, I navigate through each day, striving to reclaim the sense of safety that was stolen from me that fateful night. It's a challenging journey, and there are moments when the urge to retreat from the world feels overwhelming. Still, I press on, for the alternative would mean allowing him to take even more from me than he already has. I have come to understand that the world can be in a place where shadows dance and whispers linger, there lies a tale of resilience. A night filled with the chilling presence of deceit, where evil can masquerade behind a charming smile and the allure of a generous tip. Yet, amidst the darkness, a flicker of strength emerged, revealing a spirit unbroken. I faced that night and emerged, not just alive, but emboldened. To the man who sought to ensnare me, your attempts were in vain. I stand here, unwavering, ready to confront whatever may come. Though you may have stolen my sense of security, my life and spirit remain untouched. One day, I shall reclaim that feeling of safety, but until then, I will remain vigilant, ever aware of the shadows that linger behind me. As I glanced into my rearview mirror, the night stretched on, cloaked in shadows, and the road ahead seemed endless and foreboding. I never imagined that a simple name tag could evoke such dread. Yet there it was, Logan Taylor, pinned to his chest. My heart raced as I recognized him, the quiet kid from chemistry class, now standing before me with eyes ablaze, radiating an intensity that sent chills down my spine. This was no ordinary reunion. It marked the onset of a haunting tale. 10 years had passed since I last roamed the halls of Lincoln, a decade spent weaving a tapestry of memories, now unraveling into something far more sinister. As I embarked on my journey of forging new friendships, I found myself attempting to leave behind the echoes of my awkward teenage years. Then, the invitation for our 10-year reunion arrived, stirring a mix of hesitation and curiosity within me. I felt an urge to witness how my classmates had evolved, to gauge my own growth against theirs, a touch of vanity, perhaps. Little did I know what awaited me. Had I foreseen it, I might have cast that invitation aside and never looked back. The reunion took place in the school gym, transformed for the evening with streamers, balloons, and a rather forlorn disco ball, the air thick with a familiar scent. As I stepped into the room, a sense of nostalgia wrapped around me like a thick fog. I had arrived fashionably late, hoping to make a grand entrance, but instead, I slipped in almost unnoticed. The chatter of 100 conversations swirled around me, familiar yet distant. I caught glimpses of faces from the past. The captain of the football team, now with an impressive beer gut, and the head cheerleader, her smile a touch too wide, a hint of desperation lurking beneath. Everyone seemed to be trying so hard to impress, to showcase their successes since high school, and it felt exhausting. Just as I was about to make my way to the bar for a much-needed drink, I paused, sensing the weight of the evening's memories around me. I felt a tap on my shoulder, and when I turned, there he was, Logan Taylor. He had always been easy to overlook in high school, quiet and average-looking, often sitting in the back of the class. We had collaborated on a few projects in chemistry, yet I couldn't recall ever having a genuine conversation with him. Now he stood before me, a wide smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Emily, I was hoping you'd be here," he said, his voice carrying an enthusiasm that felt oddly forced. "Logan," I replied, searching for. It had been some time since we last spoke, and as I approached him, I noticed his smile broaden. "Oh, I've been great, really great," he said, his eyes glinting with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "I've thought about you a lot." There was something unsettling in his tone, a whisper of something lurking beneath the surface, but I dismissed it. After all, this was Logan, harmless, forgettable Logan. "That's nice," I replied, already scanning for an exit. "Listen, I was just about to grab a drink. It was good seeing you." Just as I turned to leave, his hand shot out, gripping my arm with an unexpected force. "Let me get that for you," he insisted, his voice low and insistent. "What's your—" Before I could voice my objections, he was guiding me toward the bar. The weight of our former classmates' gazes pressed upon us, their curiosity and confusion palpable. Logan Taylor and Emily Smith, what an unexpected duo we made. As we awaited our drinks, Logan maintained a steady flow of conversation, recounting details of my life since high school, my job, my home, even the name of my cat. It sent a shiver down my spine. I had shared little of that online, and I certainly hadn't kept in touch with Logan. "How do you know all this?" I wondered, a sense of unease creeping in. I asked, my voice trembling slightly, but he merely smiled that unsettling smile. "I like to keep track of old friends," he said, "especially special ones like you." The bartender handed us our drinks, and I took a large gulp, seeking the comfort of liquid courage. Logan's gaze was fixed on me, his eyes unwavering, making me feel like a bug under a microscope. As the night unfolded, I attempted to mingle with other classmates, yet Logan lingered at the periphery of every conversation. When I stepped into the restroom, there he was, waiting just outside. As I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, he materialized at my side, almost as if summoned by the night itself. "Remember that chemistry project we did together?" he asked, his voice mingling with the cool evening breeze. I nodded, unable to find my voice, recalling the only moment we truly connected in high school, the project on chemical reactions. Logan's tone shifted, taking on a wistful lilt. Yes, about chemicals, he mused, but also about you. The way you bit your lip in concentration, the scent of your shampoo, the sound of your... As the echoes of laughter faded, an unsettling alarm began to toll within my mind. This was no ordinary recollection. It was something far more consuming. Logan, I spoke with caution, that was a long time ago. We were just kids. His expression shifted, shadows creeping across his features. It doesn't feel like a long time to me, he murmured, his voice a low, ominous whisper. Every day feels like yesterday when I think about you. Emily? I instinctively took a step back, but he mirrored my movement, closing the distance between us. I've waited so long for this night, he breathed, for the chance to see you again, to tell you how I feel. My heart raced, and I stammered, I think I should go. My voice trembled, betraying the fear that gripped me. I turned to head back inside, but his hand clamped down on my wrist, pulling me back. You can't go, he hissed. Not yet. Not when we have so much to talk about. I yanked my arm free and ran back into the gym, my heart pounding. I scanned the room frantically, looking for a familiar face, someone I could turn to for help, but everyone was caught up in their own conversations, their own reunions. No one noticed my panic. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see Logan, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Why are you running from me? He demanded. After everything I've done for you, everything you've done, I repeated, bewildered. Logan, we barely knew each other in high school. We haven't spoken in 10 years. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made several nearby people turn and stare. Oh, Emily, he said, shaking his head. We've spoken every day. You just didn't know it was me. A chill ran down my spine as the pieces started to fall into place. The anonymous messages I'd been receiving for years, the feeling of being watched when I was alone, the strange gifts that would appear. It appeared on my doorstep, a package with no sender listed. It was you, I whispered, realizing all this time it was you. Logan's face lit up. You finally understand, he said, reaching for me. We're meant to be together, Emily. I've known it since that day in chemistry class, and now finally we can be. I backed away, bumping into others, oblivious to the scene I was causing. Stay away from me, I said, my voice rising, his face twisted with anger. Crazy, he spat. I'm not crazy. I love you. I've loved you for 10 years. As the shadows deepened and the night grew still, a sense of urgency filled the air. She felt the weight of his past actions pressing down on her, a reminder of the moments he had chosen others over her. But tonight was different. Tonight, she would reclaim her freedom. With a swift movement, she turned and fled, weaving through the throng of people, their startled faces blurring into the background. The gym's exit loomed ahead, and she burst into the cool night, her heart racing as she fumbled for her car keys. Behind her, she could hear him calling her name, his footsteps echoing like a distant thunder. She reached her car, diving inside and locking the doors just as he reached her window. Desperation etched across his face. Emily, he shouted, his fists pounding against the glass. Don't do this. We're supposed to be together. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life as I sped out of the parking lot, the tires screeching behind me. In my rearview mirror, Logan stood still, his eyes fixed on me, an intensity that felt palpable even from afar. I drove for hours, the fear of returning home weighing heavily on my mind. At a gas station, I found a payphone and called the police, my hands trembling as I recounted the unsettling events. They took my statement, promising to investigate, but I could sense the doubt in the officer's voice, as if my tale was merely a figment of an overactive imagination, a reunion prank that spiraled into something far more sinister. I was aware, deep down, that Logan's obsession was not just a fleeting fancy. It was a perilous reality. I sought refuge in a motel, adopting a false identity, my heart racing at every creak and whisper, convinced he was lurking nearby. Days slipped into weeks, and I took every precaution, changing my phone number, erasing my social media presence, even contemplating a move to a distant city. Yet the shadow of fear clung to me. Each time a stranger's face bore a resemblance to Logan's, or an unknown number flashed on my screen, a wave of panic surged within me. Eventually, the police uncovered evidence of Logan's unsettling fixation. In the shadows of my apartment, I discovered hidden cameras, each one a silent witness to my daily life. A notebook filled with meticulous details became my constant companion, a record of the unsettling reality I faced. Though he was arrested, the weight of his presence lingers, the trial still looming like a dark cloud. Now, I navigate my days with a heightened sense of awareness, always glancing over my shoulder, trusting my instincts when something feels amiss. The carefree girl who once attended that reunion has transformed, replaced by someone more vigilant, more guarded. Yet, I refuse to let Logan's obsession dictate my existence. I am reclaiming my narrative, seeking solace in therapy, learning to process the trauma and fear that have woven themselves into my life. Slowly, I am finding my way back to the light. In the stillness of the night, I find myself piecing together the fragments of my life, each moment a thread in the tapestry of my journey. I often reflect on that chemistry project we once shared, a seemingly innocuous task that spiraled into something far more sinister. The quiet boy, once just a figure in the shadows of the classroom, transformed into a specter that lingers in my thoughts. Though the answers elude me, a quiet resolve stirs within. I am determined to reclaim my narrative, to seek solace amidst the echoes of fear. Logan may have shattered my sense of safety, but he cannot extinguish the fire of my resilience. I have weathered his obsession, his stalking, his attack, and I will continue to rise, undeterred, to endure whatever lies ahead, for I have transformed into a survivor. No reunion, no obsession, no fear can alter this truth. The girl who once entered that gym may have faded, but the woman who emerged is fortified and prepared for whatever awaits. As I caught sight of the glimmer of chrome in my rearview mirror, an unsettling feeling washed over me. This was no ordinary drive home. Little did I realize that those motorcycles would transform my serene country road into a treacherous highway, just past midnight, as I journeyed back from On a late shift at the diner where I worked, the road unfurled before me, a dark ribbon weaving through the Arizona countryside. The radio played an old country tune, and I found myself singing along, my voice mingling with the gentle hum of my weary Chevy. It was about 10 miles outside of town when I first noticed them, just a couple of pinpricks of light in my rearview mirror, steadily growing larger. At first, I thought little of it. This road wasn't particularly busy, and it wasn't unusual to encounter other drivers, even at this hour. But as they drew nearer, I began to sense something shifting in the air. In the dim light of the night, I could discern the shapes of motorcycles, perhaps 5 or 6, darting through the darkness, their speed far exceeding the limits set for the road. I gently maneuvered my car to the right, allowing them ample space to glide past. Yet, they did not overtake me. Instead, they formed a V behind my vehicle, reminiscent of a flock of metallic geese. The roar of their engines surged, overpowering the soft melodies of my radio. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I observed them in my rearview mirror, just a group of riders enjoying the night air. I reassured myself, attempting to quell the unease that began to stir within me. In the stillness of the night, I found myself aware of the presence behind me. For 5 long miles, they lingered, never falling back, never attempting to overtake. The hum of their engines resonated through my seat, sending a shiver down my spine. My palms grew clammy, leaving damp imprints on the steering wheel as I tried to concentrate on the winding road ahead. Yet, My gaze was irresistibly drawn to the rearview mirror. In the faint light, I could discern the figures cloaked in darkness, their full-face helmets reflecting the eerie glow of my tail lights. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, one of them made a move. As the motorcycle accelerated, it pulled up alongside my car, causing me to flinch and jerk the wheel slightly before regaining control. The rider turned his head, and the blank face of his helmet seemed to stare directly into my window. I couldn't see his eyes, yet I felt their intense gaze boring into me. He lingered there for what felt like an eternity, matching my speed with an unsettling precision. Then, without warning, he swerved towards me. A startled yelp escaped my lips as I yanked the wheel to the right. My tires hit the gravel shoulder, sending a spray of rocks into the air. My heart raced as I managed to steer back onto the road, only to see the biker had fallen behind me. They fell back into formation behind me, as if the tension of the moment had simply evaporated. Yet, deep down, I sensed that this was no innocent escapade. These men were up to no good. I pressed down on the accelerator, my old Chevy groaning in protest as I urged it beyond its limits. The speedometer climbed steadily, 70, 80, 90 miles per hour, but no matter how fast I drove, the bikers matched my pace with eerie ease. My thoughts raced even faster than the car. Who were these men? What did they want? I was merely a waitress in a small-town diner, with no enemies that I was aware of. This had to be a random encounter, but something in the air told me otherwise. Thoughts swirled in my mind, offering no solace. Randomness felt like a lurking shadow, unpredictable and fraught with danger. I reached for my cell phone, my gaze split between the road ahead and the mirrors behind. No signal, of course. This stretch of highway was infamous for its dead zones. I was utterly alone. The bikers grew bolder, drawing closer, their engines roaring as they flanked my car, swerving dangerously near. Each rev of their engines sent a shiver down my spine, and I braced myself, convinced that this would be the moment they forced me off the road. I scanned the surroundings, desperate for any escape route, any glimmer of hope. Turn-off or side road I could use to lose them, but out here the options were limited. Miles of farmland stretched out on either side of the highway, broken only by the occasional dirt road leading to some distant homestead. As we crested a hill, I saw a glimmer of hope, the lights of a gas station in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was civilization. Maybe there would be people there, or at least a working phone. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, my car shuddering with the effort, and the gas station grew larger in my view. As the windshield illuminated the night, a sense of safety enveloped me, but that comfort was fleeting. Suddenly, the jarring impact shattered the calm. A biker had surged forward, colliding with my bumper. The force sent my car into a wild fishtail, tires screeching in protest as I wrestled for control. With determination, I managed to regain my composure, but the danger loomed larger as they surrounded me. A menacing wall of metal and leather, tightening their grip. The eerie sound of metal scraping against my car filled the air, and I felt my grip on the steering wheel tighten, knuckles pale, as tears of fear and frustration blurred my sight. In that moment, as I gazed into the unyielding faces hidden behind those helmets, a decision crystallized within me. If I was to meet my fate, I would not surrender easily. I pressed down on the brakes with determination, the sudden jolt catching them off guard. Two bikes collided with my rear bumper, their riders tumbling onto the asphalt in a chaotic dance. The others swerved, desperately trying to evade disaster. Seizing the opportunity amidst their confusion, I yanked the wheel sharply to the right, my car veering off the road. I bounced over the uneven terrain, my teeth rattling in my head, yet I pressed on undeterred. Slowly, I approached the gas station's driveway, its outline emerging in the dim light ahead. With a surge of adrenaline, I hit the driveway at full speed, the jolt nearly lifting my car off its wheels. I screeched into the parking lot, the brakes protesting as I came to a halt mere inches from the storefront. Without a moment's pause to check if the bikers were in pursuit, I leaped from the car and dashed toward the door. Bursting into the store, I startled the clerk, who looked as if he had just awakened from a deep slumber. "Call the police," I gasped, my voice trembling with urgency. "There are men after me." To his credit, the clerk didn't hesitate. He swiftly reached for the phone. As I picked up the phone and began to dial, I hurried to the window, peering into the enveloping darkness. The highway lay empty, devoid of the roar of engines or the glint of chrome under the moonlight. The bikers had vanished, disappearing as abruptly as they had come. I leaned against the window, feeling the adrenaline ebb away, leaving me shaky and a bit nauseous. The clerk was speaking to the police, his voice a distant murmur in my ears. When the officers arrived, I recounted my statement, describing the harrowing chase in breathless, fragmented sentences. They listened intently. There was a sense of skepticism in the air, especially as they searched for signs of the bikers, but the evidence was undeniable. The dented bumper and the scrapes along the sides of my car told a story of their own. They assured me they would investigate, looking for any similar reports in the area, yet I sensed their doubt. These occurrences were elusive, they explained, difficult to trace. The bikers could have vanished into the night, leaving no trace behind. I nodded, though my mind was elsewhere, fixated on the haunting image of those blank helmet visors, reflecting back my own fear in the dim light. The police continued their conversation, but their words faded into the background, overshadowed by the chilling memory that lingered in my thoughts. Offered to escort me home, but the thought of returning to that highway filled me with dread. Instead, I asked to use the gas station's phone and called my sister, who lived in the next town over. When she arrived, her face was pale with worry at the sight of me. As we drove away, leaving my battered Chevy behind in the gas station parking lot, I found myself glancing in the mirrors, half expecting those headlights to reappear. In the days that followed, I flinched at every motorcycle engine I heard, and I changed each morning, I chose the route to work that wound through the bustling streets, even if it meant a longer journey. I carried a can of pepper spray in my pocket, a small comfort against the shadows of uncertainty. The police never uncovered any evidence, nor were there other reports of motorcycle gangs haunting the drivers. No accidents marred that stretch of highway, as if those men had simply vanished into thin air. Sometimes, in the stillness of the night, I ponder whether I had conjured the entire ordeal from the depths of my weary mind. Perhaps the stress and fatigue of that late-night drive had given life to the Jacob riders. Yet, when I glance at my car, at the dents and scrapes that no insurance could mend, the reality of that night lingers like a whisper in the dark. The company will cover it, and I know it was real. I still drive that highway sometimes. I have to for work. But now I only do it in broad daylight, surrounded by other cars. Even then, I can't help but tense up every time I see a motorcycle in my rearview mirror. Now I know the truth that most people never have to face. Sometimes, the monsters aren't hiding under your bed or in your closet. Sometimes, they're out there on the open road, their faces concealed behind reflective visors, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. All I could do was drive with urgency, hoping to escape the clutches of fate. The moment I found myself in that clearing, a chill ran down my spine. I realized I had ventured into a realm of grave error. The sharp, acrid scent of chemicals hung heavily in the air, and the makeshift tents loomed ominously. The hard-eyed men, their gazes piercing, made it clear that this was no ordinary campsite. No, this was something far more sinister, and I was in deep waters. I had always cherished the solitude of the forest. As a botanist, it was my workplace and my sanctuary. The Pacific Northwest, with its dense, misty woods and rich tapestry of plant life, had always been a paradise for someone like me. But now that paradise felt like a distant memory. After countless hours spent wandering through these enchanting forests, I found myself cataloging rare species and reveling in the serene beauty of nature. This expedition was meant to be like any other. I had packed my gear, bid farewell to my beloved cat, and ventured into the wilderness for a week-long research trip. My aim was to study a rare species of butterfly, whispered about in local lore, said to flourish in this very area. The thrill of such work was palpable, a pursuit that could shape a career. The first few days unfolded quietly as I hiked deeper into the forest, setting up camp each night in small, inviting clearings. Beside babbling streams, I discovered a few promising specimens, carefully documenting each one in my field journal. The weather was perfect, cool and crisp, with just enough sunlight filtering through the canopy to keep the chill at bay. On the fourth day, I decided to venture off the main trail. A local guide had mentioned that the butterflies I sought often thrived in more secluded areas, away from the beaten path. It was a risk, but one I felt was worth taking for the sake of my research. I had been hiking for hours, carefully navigating the terrain. As I followed my path on the GPS, a peculiar stillness enveloped the forest. The usual melodies of birds were absent, and the gentle rustling of small creatures in the underbrush had faded into an unsettling silence. It was a quiet so profound that it sent a shiver down my spine. In that moment, I should have turned back, but the pull of curiosity, a relentless force that had always guided my steps, compelled me to venture on. Just a little further, I reassured myself, just beyond the next ridge. That's when the air shifted, and I caught a whiff of something sharp and chemical, an odor that felt entirely out of place in this untouched wilderness. The woods brought back memories of the labs at the university, a blend of solvents and other less recognizable scents. My thoughts raced with possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. I moved forward cautiously, treading lightly through the underbrush as the smell intensified. Soon, I could hear voices, low, urgent murmurs that floated through the stillness of the air. And then I caught sight of it. A clearing, tents, and a group of men, about half a dozen, moving purposefully between the makeshift structures. Equipment lay scattered around, not the kind typically used for. As I wandered through the woods, the serene beauty of nature surrounded me. Yet there was an unsettling sight that caught my eye. In the midst of the trees stood industrial machines, their tubes and dials glinting ominously in the fading light. At the center, a large blue barrel loomed, its contents shrouded in mystery, one I had no desire to unravel. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the truth. I had stumbled upon a hidden meth lab, concealed deep within the forest, far from the watchful eyes of law enforcement. My heart raced, and beads of sweat formed on my forehead, despite the cool evening air. With a sense of urgency, I began to retreat, moving slowly and carefully, hoping to slip away unnoticed. If I could just make it back to my camp, I could pack up and escape this eerie encounter before it was too late. As I made my way back to civilization, intent on reporting what I had witnessed, fate had other designs in store for me. With a cautious step backward, my foot landed on a brittle branch, the sharp crack resonating through the stillness of the clearing like a thunderclap. In that instant, every gaze turned toward me, and time itself seemed to pause. I stood there, frozen, locked in a silent exchange with the men before me. Their expressions shifted from shock to something far more perilous. Anger, fear, determination. Then, a voice pierced the tension, shouting, "Get her!" and chaos erupted around me. I ran as if the very essence of fear propelled me forward, crashing through the undergrowth without a thought for stealth or direction. All that mattered was the distance I could place between myself and those men, their shouts echoing behind me, mingling with the sound of breaking branches that urged me to greater speed. My lungs burned, my legs ached, yet terror was my relentless companion, driving me onward. I had no plan, no destination, The carefully marked trail I had once followed faded from my mind in the haze of panic. I was running blind, ducking under low-hanging branches and leaping over obstacles, lost in the night's embrace. As I stumbled over fallen logs, a gunshot pierced the stillness, its echo weaving through the trees. I couldn't help but yell, instinctively ducking lower as I fled. They were shooting at me now. This was no longer a mere attempt to scare away an unwanted witness. These men were prepared to kill to safeguard their secrets. Time slipped away from me in the frantic rush through the forest, each moment blending into the next. But eventually, I noticed a profound silence enveloping the woods. The sounds of my pursuers had faded, leaving only the ragged rhythm of my own breath. I came to a halt, my legs trembling beneath me. As I leaned against the sturdy trunk of a tree, trembling from both exertion and fear, I took a moment to catch my breath and assess my predicament. It was clear I was lost. In my panic, I had strayed far from the trail, and the path back to my camp or any semblance of safety eluded me. My backpack, along with most of my supplies, remained at the campsite, leaving me with only my field journal, a water bottle, and a small first aid kit. It was a meager collection for survival, especially if I found myself out here for days. Gradually, as my breathing steadied, I began to gather my thoughts. As I became aware of a stinging sensation on my arm, I glanced down to find a long scratch, likely a souvenir from a branch I had encountered during my hurried escape. It bled sluggishly, yet it didn't appear too serious. Still, I took the time to clean and bandage it as best as I could with the limited supplies at hand. Night was creeping in, the forest growing darker with each passing moment. I knew I needed to find shelter, but the very thought of stopping, of making myself vulnerable, sent a fresh wave of panic coursing through me. What if they were still out there, searching? In the end, it was exhaustion that made the decision for me. I stumbled upon a dense thicket and nestled within, curling up as small as I could. Sleep eluded me, though I dozed fitfully, jolting awake at every rustle and whisper. The following days blurred together, filled with hunger, fear, and frantic efforts to navigate my way back to civilization. By day, I walked, tracing the sun's path, hoping it would guide me east toward the ranger station I believed lay in that direction. At night, I concealed myself, too frightened to light a fire, even as the chills settled in. I rationed my water with care, each drop a precious lifeline. But it ran out on the second day. After that, I drank from streams when I could find them, praying I wouldn't get sick. Hunger was a constant companion, a gnawing ache in my belly that I tried to ignore. On the third day, I thought I heard the distant sound of a helicopter. I ran towards the noise, waving my arms and shouting, but the sound faded before I could reach a clearing. I collapsed to the ground, sobbing with frustration and fear. It was on the fourth day that I finally saw something that gave me hope. A trail. Jameser, weathered and half hidden by the foliage, stood there, unmistakably man-made. Relief washed over me as I followed the Jamesers, eventually finding my way to a wider trail and then to a fire road. By that point, I was limping. My feet were blistered and sore, my body weak from lack of food and sleep. Yet, the sight of that road ignited a surge of energy within me. I pressed on, moving as quickly as I could manage, the sun dipping low in the sky. Then, I heard it, the most beautiful sound in the world. A car engine. Moments later, a Forest Service truck rounded the bend, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Found myself in the middle of the road, arms flailing in desperation. The ranger who came to my aid was taken aback by my disheveled state and the tale I had to tell. Without hesitation, he called for backup, and soon I was enveloped in a warm blanket, safely tucked in the back of his truck. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, medical examinations, and discussions with my university. The meth lab was discovered and dismantled, though the operators had vanished into the night. My research was paused indefinitely as I took time to heal from the experience. Months have passed since that fateful night, and I still reflect on the shadows that lingered around me. Though I have yet to return to the deep forest, the memories of those once comforting woods now wrap around me like a shroud of dread. Nightmares haunt my sleep, visions of running through endless trees, with nameless threats lurking just behind. Yet, I find solace in the slow, steady healing that comes with time. I've begun to explore more accessible areas, always accompanied by a partner, as I take cautious steps toward reclaiming my love for the forest. It remains a part of me, woven into my very being, for better or worse, and I hold on to the hope that one day I will gather the courage to wander back into the wild embrace of the deep wilderness. Now, as I reflect on the world around me, I understand that nature can be both beautiful and treacherous, with dangers hiding in the most enchanting corners. Yet, through it all, I discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed. I faced those chilling days alone in the woods, outsmarting those who sought to do me harm, and that resilience is a treasure no one can ever take from me. The moment I gazed into the children's eyes, a sense of dread washed over me. What should have been a simple babysitting job had transformed into a night filled with unspeakable terror, and I found myself ensnared in its grasp. It was a simple task, really. I had been babysitting for the Davis family for months, caring for their two children, Sophia, who was 8, and Liam, who was 6, every other Friday night. The Davises typically returned home by midnight, and the kids would be fast asleep by 9 o'clock. This arrangement allowed me to earn some extra cash while also catching up on my homework. A perfect balance. This particular Friday began just like any other. I arrived at 6 p.m. As Mrs. Davis hurriedly donned her earrings, her voice filled the air with familiar urgency. Mr. Davis was already in the car, the horn sounding impatiently, a reminder of the ticking clock. "Emergency numbers are on the fridge," she instructed, her words flowing like a well-rehearsed script. "Kids need to be in bed by 9 o'clock. No sugar after 7 o'clock. I had heard this speech countless times before, yet it always carried a weight of responsibility. "Oh, and Emily, the kids have been a bit off lately. Probably just a bug going around school. Nothing to worry about, I'm sure." With that cryptic farewell, she was gone, leaving me alone with Sophia and Liam. At first, everything seemed normal as we sat down for dinner, a comforting plate of mac and cheese before us. It was a favorite evening ritual, allowing the kids to watch some TV while I dove into my calculus homework. Yet, as the night deepened, a peculiar atmosphere settled around us. Sophia, usually so chatty and vibrant, sat unusually silent, her gaze fixed on the screen, though it seemed she was lost in thought rather than engaged. Meanwhile, Liam couldn't find his place. He wandered the living room, pausing now and then to press his ear against the wall, as if he were trying to catch whispers from the shadows. "You okay, guys?" I asked, striving to keep my tone light, though a sense of unease began to creep in. They both turned to look at me, and a chill crept down my spine. Their eyes held an unsettling quality. The pupils were dilated, nearly completely black, and they seemed to reflect the light in a way that felt otherworldly. "We're fine," Emily said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Everything is fine." I let out a nervous laugh, attempting to dispel the rising unease within me. "All right, well, it's almost bedtime. Why don't you two head upstairs and get ready?" But they didn't move. They just kept staring at me, their gaze unyielding. Those unsettling eyes, Emily. Liam's voice, unnaturally deep for a 6-year-old, asked, "Do you want to play a game?" Before I could respond, the lights flickered once, twice, then plunged us into darkness. I heard movement in the pitch black, the sound of small feet padding across the hardwood floor. "Sophia? Liam?" I called out, fumbling for my phone to use as a flashlight. "Where are you?" My phone screen lit up, casting an eerie blue glow around the room. The kids were gone. Heart pounding, I made my way to the kitchen to find the circuit. As I made my way past the bot Jacob of the stairs, a giggle floated down from above. It wasn't the familiar sound of Sophia or Liam. It felt unsettling, out of place. I located the breaker box and flipped the switches, watching as the lights flickered back to life. A sigh of relief escaped my lips, but it was fleeting. Turning back toward the living room, my heart sank at the sight that greeted me. On the wall, in what appeared to be blood, were the chilling words, "Come play with us, Emily." Surely, this had to be a prank, some elaborate joke the Davis were playing on me. Yet, even as I tried to convince myself, a shiver ran down my spine. As the thought crossed my mind, I understood it wasn't true. The fear I felt was too real, too primal. I dashed to the front door, consumed by the urge to escape, but it wouldn't budge. The knob turned, yet it felt as if something on the other side held it firmly shut. "Sophia! Liam!" I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. "This isn't funny. Come out right now." In response, I heard that same unsettling giggle, this time echoing from the kitchen. I spun around, and there they stood, side by side in the doorway, but they didn't resemble Sophia and Liam at all. Once, their skin had a healthy glow, but now it was pale, almost translucent, with dark veins weaving like shadows beneath the surface. Their mouths were stretched into impossible grins, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth that glinted in the dim light. And their eyes, oh, those eyes, were completely black, like bottomless pits that swallowed all hope. "What's wrong?" Emily asked, her voice a raspy echo of the sweet child I once knew. "Don't you want to play?" I felt myself backing away, my mind spinning in disbelief. This couldn't be real. Such horrors were reserved for stories. Yet, the terror that gripped my heart was all too real. "What are you?" I whispered, my back pressed against the locked front door. Liam tilted his head at an unnatural angle. "We are hungry, Emily. So very hungry, and you smell delicious." They began to move towards me, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, like marionettes controlled by an unskilled puppeteer. I looked around frantically for a weapon, anything I could use to defend myself. My eyes fell on the umbrella stand next to the door. I grabbed an umbrella, holding it out in front of me like a sword. "Stay back!" I yelled, trying to sound brave. Braver than I felt, they paused, exchanging glances with those terrible black eyes. Then, in perfect unison, they began to laugh. A sound so horrible, it pierced the air like nails on a chalkboard, mingled with the growl of a wild animal. Seizing their momentary distraction, I made a dash for the stairs. If I could reach the second floor, perhaps I could find a window to escape through. I took the stairs two at a time, the children's laughter echoing ominously behind me. Bursting into the master bedroom, I slammed the door shut and pushed a heavy dresser in front of it, my heart racing in the stillness that followed. Breathless, I rushed to the window, only to find it stubbornly stuck. In a moment of desperation, I seized a lamp from the bedside table and shattered the glass, ignoring the sting of cuts on my hands. Just as I was about to escape, a chilling sound froze me in place. From behind the bedroom door came a hauntingly sweet voice. "Emily, oh Emily, why do you run? The fun has only just begun." The dresser began to shift, inch by inch, as if guided by an unseen hand. I realized time was slipping away. With urgency, I climbed onto the roof, feeling the sharp edges beneath me. With a broken window tearing at my clothes, the ground appeared impossibly far below. Yet I knew I had no choice. Behind me, the bedroom door creaked open, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. I jumped, and the fall seemed to stretch into eternity before I finally hit the ground, pain exploding through my leg as I landed awkwardly. But adrenaline surged through me, propelling me forward. I limped as quickly as I could toward the street, not daring to glance back. I reached the neighbor's house, pounding on their door and screaming for help. The porch light flickered on, and I heard the unmistakable sound of locks being undone, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. As the door creaked open, I dared to cast a fleeting look back at the Davis house. There, in the upstairs window, stood Sophia and Liam, their dark eyes locked onto mine, their unsettling grins still etched upon their faces. Then, just as the neighbor ushered me inside, they disappeared from view. The police arrived, of course, conducting a thorough search of the house, yet they uncovered nothing amiss. No blood staining the walls, no shattered windows. Sophia and Liam lay peacefully in their beds, appearing perfectly ordinary. The Devises returned home, bewildered and worried, while my tale fell on disbelieving ears. How could they accept my account? Seemed utterly mad, even to me. They attributed it to stress, perhaps an adverse reaction to the medication I was given. I returned home with a sprained ankle and a suggestion for a good therapist. Yet, deep down, I know what I witnessed. I know that night was real. I decided to stop babysitting after that. The mere thought of being alone with children again filled me with dread. My friends believe I'm overreacting, that I'm allowing one unfortunate experience to tarnish something I once cherished. But they didn't witness what I saw. They didn't experience the sheer terror that gripped me. Sometimes late at night, in the stillness of the night, I find myself haunted by a peculiar giggle that echoes through my dreams. Those black eyes, lurking in the shadows, seem to pierce through the veil of darkness, and I can't help but ponder the possibilities. What if it happens again? What if, this time, there is no escape? The answers elude me, yet I sense a chilling truth. The world is far more sinister than I ever dared to believe. Somewhere, in the depths of that darkness, two children with ravenous black eyes and sharp teeth lie in wait, eager for their next unsuspecting victim. So, should you ever find yourself in the role of a caregiver and an unsettling feeling creeps in, if the children begin to act oddly or their eyes appear unnaturally dark, heed this warning. Do not hesitate, do not linger. To make sense of it all, just run. Run as fast and as far as you can. You see, you never know when a seemingly ordinary night of babysitting might twist into something far more sinister. The first time I witnessed my neighbor dragging a suspiciously human-shaped bag into his basement, I convinced myself it was merely my imagination playing tricks. But by the third time, I realized I was living next door to a true monster. It all began on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday evening. I had just settled into my new rental home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, eager for a fresh start after a tumultuous breakup. The house, it was a bit old and creaky, but it had character and, more importantly, it was affordable. As I unpacked boxes in the living room, I first noticed him, my new neighbor. He was a tall, thin man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. From my window, I watched as he methodically mowed his perfectly manicured lawn. There was something off about the way he moved. Too precise, too controlled, but I brushed it off. After all, I had always been prone to overthinking. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I heard a strange sound. There was a noise, a dragging sound that was soon accompanied by a heavy thud. Curiosity piqued. I leaned out of my bedroom window, bathed in the dim glow of the streetlight. Below, my neighbor was struggling with what appeared to be a large, heavy bag, pulling it toward his basement door. For just a fleeting moment, I could have sworn I saw the bag move. But then, he vanished into the shadows of the basement, and I reassured myself it was merely a trick of the light. Probably just taking out some old garbage, I reasoned. Nothing to worry about. The next morning, everything seemed normal. It was an ordinary morning when I noticed my neighbor departing for work, briefcase in hand, embodying the image of a respectable suburban professional. He even offered a friendly wave as he climbed into his car, and I returned the gesture, feeling a twinge of embarrassment for my late-night musings. But then, the peculiar occurrences began anew. Each night, under the cloak of darkness, I witnessed the same unsettling pattern unfold. The dragging sound, the struggle with the bag, the eerie descent into the basement. Each instance deepened my conviction that something was amiss. I found myself drawn into a web of curiosity, paying closer attention to the shadows that danced around my once familiar neighborhood. His name was William, a neighbor I came to know through our brief exchanges over the fence. He was polite, though somewhat reserved, and spent his days working as an accountant in the city. He mostly kept to himself, which was not unusual for our neighborhood. Yet, as I observed him more closely, I began to notice peculiarities that stirred my curiosity. For instance, his trash cans were almost always nearly empty on collection day, despite his solitary living. There was also a strange chemical smell that would occasionally drift from his property late at night, and sometimes he would, in the stillness of the night, I found myself standing in my backyard, gazing into the shadows that stretched across the distance. There was an unsettling intensity in the air, a whisper of something amiss. I wrestled with the thought of going to the police, but what could I possibly say? That my seemingly ordinary neighbor sometimes carried heavy bags into his basement under the cover of darkness? That an uneasy feeling gnawed at my insides? I feared they would dismiss me as just another nosy neighbor, stirring trouble where none existed. So I chose a different path. I began to investigate on my own. I know it may sound a bit unhinged, but the thought of remaining idle while something sinister lurked nearby was unbearable. I felt compelled to uncover the truth, convinced that something dreadful was unfolding just beyond my sight. Right next door, a curious tale began to unfold. I started by meticulously recording William's movements, noting the times he departed for work and when he returned. Most intriguingly, I tracked those mysterious late-night excursions to the basement. To enhance my observations, I even acquired a pair of binoculars for clearer nighttime views. If anyone had caught a glimpse of me, they might have deemed me the eccentric one. As the weeks drifted by, a pattern began to reveal itself. Those basement visits consistently occurred on Friday nights, typically around 2 a.m., and so it was that William would return home much later than usual, often in a car that seemed foreign to me. One fateful night, driven by a blend of fear and an insatiable curiosity, I resolved to investigate further. I waited patiently until I saw William's car pull away from the driveway, then quietly made my way to his property. The basement windows, nestled at ground level and shrouded by wild, overgrown shrubs, beckoned me closer. With trembling hands, I pushed aside the branches, my heart racing in my chest, echoing like a drum in the stillness. Pressing my face against the cool glass, I dared to peer inside, my breath held tight in anticipation. What I encountered lingers in my mind, a chilling memory that refuses to fade. The basement was unnaturally pristine, almost sterile, with harsh fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow over a space that resembled a laboratory more than a typical suburban retreat. Tables were adorned with unfamiliar equipment, while shelves held jars filled with enigmatic substances. At the heart of this unsettling scene lay a large metal table, complete with ominous straps. Yet, it was the walls that truly sent shivers down my spine. Photos, countless images, each depicting a different individual, men and women of various ages, their expressions frozen in time, whispering secrets of their own, were crossed out with angry red marks. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This was real, concrete evidence that something horrific was happening in that basement. I had to do something. I ran back to my house, fumbling with my phone to call 911. But just as I was about to dial, headlights swept across my living room. William was back. Panic seized me. What if he had seen me? What if he knew that I knew? I couldn't call the police now, not with him right there. He'd hear the sirens. He'd know it was me. So I watched from my window, my heart racing as William stepped out of his car, a bag in his hands, just like before. But this time, a chilling realization settled in. I knew what was inside, or rather, who. Fear gripped me, leaving me frozen in place. I longed to rush outside, to intervene, to save the one trapped within that bag. Yet terror held me back. What if he was stronger? What if I became his next target? In that moment of dread, I resorted to the only plan I could muster. I flicked on every light in the house, cranked the TV to its maximum volume, creating a cacophony of sound, hoping it would shield me from the darkness creeping closer. Disrupt whatever he had planned. It worked, sort of. William hesitated, glancing toward my house with a blend of confusion and anger. Instead of heading to the basement, he dragged the bag around to his garage. I kept up the noise all night, not daring to sleep. When morning came, I was exhausted but resolute. I had to end this one way or another. As soon as I thought it was late enough, I called the police. I told them everything about the bags, the basement, the photos on the wall. I must have sounded like a madwoman, but there was something in my voice that seemed to draw them in, urging them to take a closer look. The next few hours became a haze as police cars swarmed our once peaceful street. From my window, I observed them knocking on William's door, the chilling sight of him being led away in handcuffs. Dogs were brought in to scour the property, and soon the grim revelations began to surface. Bodies were unearthed from the backyard, and the basement held evidence of unspeakable horrors. With each passing moment, the number of William's victims grew, leaving the neighborhood in a state of disbelief and dread. How could such a thing unfold in our peaceful suburb? How had it escaped everyone's notice? Yet, I had seen the signs, and the burden of not acting sooner pressed down on my heart. Could I have saved some of those souls if I had approached the police earlier? If only I hadn't allowed fear and uncertainty to restrain me. In the days that followed, I provided countless statements to the authorities, and I was hailed as the one who had finally brought an end to William's reign of terror. But it felt far from a victory, especially when I reflected on the lives lost and the families shattered. The media flocked to our street, eager for every morsel of the chilling tale. I found myself ensnared by the relentless echoes of what had transpired just next door. The very house where I had envisioned a new beginning transformed into a confining cell of remorse and dread. Sleep eluded me, haunted by the images that lingered on William's basement wall. Each glance at my neighbor's home conjured visions of the terrors that unfolded within. Every sudden noise sent a shiver down my spine, as if William himself might return to reclaim his dark legacy. Returning to the stillness, I found myself haunted by the neighbor who had unveiled his wrongdoings. In the end, I could no longer remain. I left less than a month after William's arrest, abandoning the house and the terrors it contained. Yet the memories lingered, trailing me through the years. Even now, I catch myself observing my neighbors with an intensity that feels excessive. Each peculiar sound, every late-night occurrence sends my heart into a frantic rhythm. I understand it's not rational, but the shadows that can lurk behind an ordinary exterior are a truth I can never unsee. To unsee it, so if you ever feel that nagging sensation that something isn't quite right, don't ignore it. Don't let fear, doubt, or the urge to mind your own business prevent you from taking action. Sometimes, the monster isn't lurking under the bed or tucked away in the closet. Sometimes, it's right next door, mowing its lawn and waving hello. By the time you come to that realization, it might be too late. The moment their headlights filled my rearview mirror, I understood this was not going to be an ordinary drive. Little did, I could sense the ominous glow ahead, a path that promised a kind of fear I had only ever encountered in my darkest dreams. What was meant to be a straightforward road trip, just me, my trusty old Honda Civic, and 300 miles of open highway leading to my sister's wedding, had taken a turn. I had traveled this route countless times, always choosing the scenic path that meandered through the mountains instead of the bustling interstate. The views were stunning, and the solitude offered a much-needed respite from my busy city life. I set off late, around 9 p.m., deciding to take a drive through the night and arrive just in time for the rehearsal dinner. The first few hours were uneventful. The radio kept me company as I navigated the dark, twisting roads, my headlights cutting through the inky blackness of the forest on either side. It was just past midnight when I first noticed the car behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. This road wasn't exactly busy, but it wasn't uncommon to see other travelers even at this hour. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized they weren't passing or falling behind. They were maintaining a steady distance. There was a constant distance, close enough that their headlights flooded my car with harsh light. I squinted, trying to make out the vehicle in my mirror. It looked like a large pickup truck, but the glare made it hard to see any details. A sense of unease began to creep over me. Why were they following so closely? There was plenty of room to pass on this stretch of road. Trying to shake off my growing paranoia, I eased my foot off the gas, slowing down to give them an opportunity to go around. But they just slowed down too, maintaining that same uncomfortable proximity. As I drew nearer, an unsettling rhythm began to echo in my chest, a beat that felt out of place. I pressed down on the accelerator, urging my old Civic to navigate the winding mountain roads with a speed that felt reckless. Yet, the truck behind me maintained its pace with an ease that sent a chill down my spine. It was then that I spotted them. A second set of headlights, joining the first, both vehicles now shadowing me with an unnerving closeness. My palms grew clammy as I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, a sense of dread creeping in. This was no mere coincidence. Two vehicles, working in unison, were trailing me through the desolate darkness of nowhere. In the stillness of the night, an unsettling feeling crept over me, a whisper in the dark that something was amiss. I reached for my phone, hoping to call for help, only to be met with the dreaded, no service message flickering on the screen. These mountain roads were infamous for their lack of cell coverage, a fact I had come to dread. Suddenly, the vehicles behind me roared to life, their engines revving, the sound bouncing off the trees like a sinister echo. I flinched, my car swerving slightly before I steadied it. It dawned on me then. They were playing a game, like predators toying with their unsuspecting prey, preparing to strike. My thoughts raced, a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. As I drove, I searched my memory for any signs of towns or gas stations, but deep down, I knew the truth. I was miles away from civilization, alone on this shadowy road, with the presence of those vehicles looming behind me. Suddenly, the truck behind me flashed its high beams. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, a sound pierced the stillness, sending a chill through my veins. A long, loud blast from the truck horn. It wasn't a friendly greeting or a cautionary warning. It felt like a signal. The second vehicle, an SUV, surged forward, pulling alongside my car, matching my pace. I dared to steal a glance over, but the darkness held its secrets tightly. The windows were tinted dark, obscuring the identity of the driver. Suddenly, without warning, the SUV swerved toward me. I yanked the wheel hard, narrowly avoiding a collision, my tires screeching as I struggled to maintain control. My heart pounded so fiercely that it drowned out the roar of the engines behind me. Panic surged within. This was no longer mere harassment. These people, whoever they were, intended to harm me or worse. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, urging my old car to its limits as the engine strained against the pressure. In the stillness of the night, as the speedometer climbed to dizzying heights of 80, 90, and even 100 miles per hour, a sense of madness enveloped me. The roads, treacherous and winding, seemed to whisper warnings that I was too frantic to heed. My mind was consumed by a singular thought: escape. The looming presence of a truck and an SUV flanked me, their intentions clear as they attempted to box me in. A chill crept over me as I realized that at these breakneck speeds, even the slightest miscalculation could lead to disaster. Ahead, a turnoff appeared, a smaller road, shrouded in darkness, beckoning me. In a moment of desperation, I wrenched the wheel, the tires screeching in protest as I made my fateful choice. As I made the turn at the last possible moment, The blare of horns and the squeal of tires echoed behind me, a reminder of my pursuers struggling to keep up. Their larger, heavier vehicles faltered, unable to navigate the turn at such speed. The new road was narrower and rougher, my car bouncing and shuddering as I sped down it, branches whipping past my windows like fleeting shadows. I didn't dare slow down. The sound of engines behind me was a chilling reminder that my reprieve was only temporary. I drove blindly, taking turns at random whenever the road forked, my only goal to create as much distance as possible. The distance between myself and those vehicles felt crucial, yet with each passing minute, a new fear began to take root. I was hopelessly lost. What felt like hours had likely only been 20 minutes. The engines that had once roared behind me were now silent. I slowed my car, which limped along, the engine emitting ominous sounds, a reminder that I had pushed it too hard. I found myself on a dirt road, little more than a trail, with trees pressing in on all sides. The silence was heavy, a stark contrast to the chaos of the chase. Then, through the trees, I caught a glimmer of light, and hope surged within me. Through the veil of civilization's safety, I followed the light. The road widened slightly as I rounded a bend, revealing its source, a small gas station, its fluorescent lights standing as a beacon in the darkness. I pulled up to the pumps, my hands trembling so badly that I could barely turn off the engine. As I stumbled out of the car, the door to the station opened, and an old man peered out, looking both confused and a little wary. "You all right, miss?" he called out. The concern in his voice broke something within me, and I burst into tears, the full weight of what had just transpired crashing down upon me. As the weight of the night pressed down on me, I found myself caught between sobs, struggling to recount the events that had unfolded. The old man listened intently, his expression turning serious as he ushered me inside, securing the door with a firm click. "You're not the first," he said, offering me a warm cup of coffee. "We've had reports of strange occurrences on that road. People being run off, cars vanishing without a trace. The police claim there's no evidence," he murmured, shaking his head slowly. He kindly allowed me to use the phone to call the police, and then my sister to let her know I would be safe. As I sat there, the night wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I felt the tremors of fear coursing through my body. Each rustle of leaves or distant sound made my heart race, as if the shadows themselves were creeping closer, searching for me. When the police finally arrived, their presence brought a flicker of hope, yet their skeptical glances told a different story. I struggled to find the words to describe the vehicles. Just a truck and an SUV. Nothing more. The drivers remained a blur in my memory, and the reasons for their pursuit eluded me. They assured me they would investigate and keep an eye on the area, but I could sense their doubt, a quiet understanding that perhaps some mysteries are too dark to unravel. The old man kindly offered me a place to stay at the station until morning, and I accepted with gratitude, too frightened to venture back onto the road. As the sun began to rise, casting soft hues of pink and gold across the sky, I finally felt a sense of safety return. Yet, as I pulled away from the gas station, an unsettling feeling lingered, as if those vehicles were still out there, lurking, poised to continue their pursuit. I arrived at my sister's wedding, shaken but alive, sharing only a sanitized version of my experience with my family, not wanting to cause them any worry. Bright, remember that not all shadows lurk in the corners of the night. Some may be closer than you think, concealed behind the blinding glare of headlights and the darkened glass of a car. Since that fateful night, I've chosen to travel only on well-lit, busy highways, ever vigilant of what might be lurking behind me. The truth is, once you've glimpsed the reality that many remain blissfully unaware of, it lingers in your mind like a haunting whisper. So, if you find yourself driving under the cloak of darkness and notice those headlights in your rearview mirror, take heed. They may not just be a figment of your imagination, but a reminder of the unsettling truths that dwell among us. Close your eyes for a moment and listen closely. There's a feeling in your gut, a whisper that urges you not to dismiss it. It might just save your life. Out there, on those dark, lonely roads, not everyone is simply trying to find their way home. Some are hunting, and you can never quite tell when you might become the prey. The moment I laid eyes on those unmarked crates being loaded onto that plane, a chill ran down my spine. I realized then that I had stumbled upon something I was never meant to see. Little did I know, my late-night shift at the airport was about to transform into a desperate fight for survival. I had been working for about 6 months. I worked the graveyard shift at Millbrook International Airport. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and I found solace in the quiet of the airport at night. Most of the time, it was just me, a handful of security guards, and the occasional red-eye flight crew. That night began like any other. I clocked in at 11 p.m. I nodded to Oliver at security and began my rounds through the cargo area. Everything felt routine, a familiar rhythm, until the clock struck 2 a.m. As I listened closely, the unmistakable sound of a plane taxiing filled the air. It struck me as odd. There were no scheduled flights at this hour, and unscheduled landings typically brought a flurry of activity. Yet, this plane arrived quietly, almost stealthily. My curiosity piqued. I crept to the window that overlooked the tarmac, careful to remain in the shadows. The aircraft was a nondescript cargo carrier, devoid of any airline markings. As I observed, a group of men emerged, their intentions shrouded in mystery. As I stepped out from what I believed to be an empty hangar, a group of figures clad in dark attire caught my eye. They moved with a sense of urgency, and soon the cargo hold of the plane creaked open, revealing large wooden crates that seemed to hold secrets of their own. My heart quickened. This was no ordinary cargo operation. Each box that passed through this airport was meant to be logged, labeled, and tracked, yet these crates were shrouded in anonymity. A whisper of instinct urged me to turn away, to retreat into the safety of my routine, but something held me there, tethered to the unfolding mystery. The spot, I stood there, observing as crate after crate was unloaded and whisked away into the hangar. Then, something caught my eye, sending a chill through my veins. One of the men, burdened by a crate, stumbled. The crate hit the ground with a thud, and the lid popped open slightly. In the dim light of the tarmac, I noticed a glint inside, something that resembled the barrel of a gun. My thoughts raced. Guns being smuggled through our airport was no small matter. I needed to report this, to warn someone. But as I turned to leave, my elbow brushed against. A metal shelf clanged, the sound reverberating through the stillness of the night. I froze on the tarmac, every head turning toward the window where I concealed myself. I ducked down, my heart racing, praying I had remained unseen. For a long moment, silence enveloped me, then voices broke through, angry and urgent, accompanied by the sound of footsteps entering the building. Panic surged within me. I had to escape. I scrambled to my feet and ran, no longer caring about the noise I made. Behind me, shouts echoed, and the relentless sound of pursuing footsteps followed as I burst out of the cargo area. As I stepped into the main terminal, my thoughts raced like shadows in the night. Where could I go? Who could I trust? The idea of seeking help from security flickered in my mind, but a chilling thought held me back. What if they were part of it? What if the entire airport was a web of deceit? I slipped into a maintenance closet, the darkness wrapping around me like a shroud, trying to catch my breath and gather my thoughts. I needed to call the police, but my cell phone lay locked away in my locker. There was a landline in the office, but it felt like a distant dream, located on the far side of the terminal. As I stood there, frozen in uncertainty, I heard voices whispering just outside the closet door, sending a shiver down my spine. In the stillness of the night, I ventured forth, my heart pounding softly in my chest. I had gone far to find her, and I reminded myself to tread lightly, for drawing attention could spell disaster. I pressed myself against the cool wall, holding my breath as footsteps echoed past the closet door. Once the sound faded into the shadows, I exhaled, knowing that my sanctuary was only temporary. The search would come and I had to move. With a cautious hand, I cracked the door, peering into the dimly lit terminal. It appeared clear, and with a deep breath, I slipped out, keeping low as I made my way toward the office, the weight of the night pressing down around me. Using the check-in counters as cover, I was about halfway there when a shout pierced the air. "There she is!" I ran, full out, sprinting across the terminal, abandoning any pretense of stealth. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps echoing on the hard floor. I reached the office and slammed the door shut, fumbling with the lock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely manage it. I grabbed the phone, punching in 911 as I heard bodies slam against the door. "911? What's your emergency?" the operator asked. I gasped. "I'm at Millbrook International Airport. Men were smuggling weapons, their intentions shrouded in darkness." Suddenly, the door burst open, and the phone was ripped from my hand. I found myself staring down the barrel of a gun, held by a man with cold eyes and a scarred face. "That was a very stupid thing to do," he said, his voice calm yet terrifying. I was marched out of the office at gunpoint, my arms held tightly by two other men. They took me to the hangar, where I had seen them unloading the crates. Inside, I beheld stacks upon stacks of wooden boxes, enough weapons to supply a small army. A well-dressed man I hadn't seen before stood among them. As he approached, his gaze swept over me, a blend of annoyance and calculation etched on his face. "What do we do with her, boss?" the man holding me inquired. The well-dressed man let out a weary sigh, acknowledging the complexity of the situation. "We can't afford loose ends, but a missing airport employee will raise too many questions." He turned his attention to me, his voice steady yet firm. "What's your name?" "Emily," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "Well, Emily," he continued, "you've put us in quite a predicament. I don't suppose I could convince you to forget everything you've seen tonight." I remained silent, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. Terrified to speak, he nodded, as if my silence was answer enough. I thought, "Not well, we'll have to." He was cut off by the sound of sirens in the distance. Everyone in the hangar froze. "Impossible," the scarred man growled. We cut the call before she could give any details. The well-dressed man's eyes narrowed. "It seems our friend Emily here is cleverer than we gave her credit for." He turned to the others. "Pack it up now. Leave nothing behind." The hangar erupted into frantic activity, men loading crates back onto the plane with remarkable speed. A well-dressed man turned to me, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "It seems it's your lucky day, Emily," he said, his voice smooth yet chilling. "We don't have time to deal with you properly." He nodded to the men who held me captive. "Put her in the office. Make sure she can't raise any more alarms." I was dragged back to the office, my arms bound tightly with duct tape. They shoved me into a supply closet, slamming the door shut behind me. I heard the scrape of something heavy being pushed against it, sealing me in. From within the confines of the closet, muffled shouts echoed, accompanied by the roaring sound of engines coming to life. The plane was taking off. As the sound of boots echoed on the tile, accompanied by the crackling of a police radio, I called out, my voice hoarse, "Hello? I'm in here." It felt as though time stretched endlessly before the door creaked open. I blinked against the sudden brightness, meeting the worried gaze of a police officer. The following hours blurred into a whirlwind of questions and statements. I recounted every detail, every sound that had pierced the night. They listened intently, yet I sensed a flicker of skepticism in their eyes. A massive weapons smuggling operation unfolding right beneath their watchful gaze, it seemed. As dawn broke, I found myself nestled in a small office, a blanket draped around my shoulders and a warm cup of coffee cradled in my hands. Across from me sat a detective, his expression somber. "We found evidence of the operation," he said, his voice steady. "Traces in the hangar fuel records for an unscheduled flight. But the weapons, the men you described, they're gone, vanished." I nodded, a sense of inevitability washing over me. They had ample time to erase their presence. "What happens now?" I inquired softly. The detective let out a weary sigh. "We'll investigate, of course. But without concrete evidence, it's going to be difficult. It would be difficult to establish any proof." He leaned in closer, his voice low and steady. "You should understand, this runs deep. We've already received calls from individuals far beyond my level, urging us to let this go. Whatever you witnessed, whoever those men were, they have influential allies." A shiver crept down my spine. "Am I in danger?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He paused, then nodded slowly. "I believe you might be. We can provide protection, perhaps even a new identity if it comes to that. But the life you once knew, I'm afraid that's over." As I stepped out of the airport that morning, squinting against the harsh sunlight, a realization settled within me. Nothing would ever be the same. My normal life had been shattered in a single night, replaced by a world of shadows and secrets. I no longer work at the airport. I move around a lot, always looking over my shoulder. I know the truth now. I've seen behind the curtain, glimpsed the dark machinery that moves beneath the surface of our world. Somewhere out there, those men are still operating, still smuggling, still killing. They haven't forgotten about me, the night shift worker who saw too much. Much has been experienced, and here I am to share the tale, at least for now. So, if you ever find yourself working late in an airport or any other place, and something feels off, take a moment to ponder your next move. Once you venture into the shadows, returning to the light may not be an option. The night shift, you see, never truly concludes. It simply deepens. The moment I laid eyes on the blood-stained tent, I understood that my once peaceful hiking trip had morphed into a nightmare. Little did I know, I was about to become the prey in a twisted game of cat and mouse. It was meant to be a solo weekend escape, just me and the vast expanse of nature. For months, I had been carefully plotting my journey through the Rocky Mountains. As someone well-versed in hiking, I felt no apprehension about the solitude. In fact, I welcomed it. The first day unfolded as I had envisioned, with steady progress, ideal weather, and stunning vistas. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I discovered a lovely clearing to pitch my tent. After savoring my freeze-dried dinner, I chose to take a brief evening stroll. As I took a leisurely stroll to stretch my legs before settling in for the night, I noticed something unusual about a quarter of a mile from my campsite. Partially obscured by the trees stood another tent. Initially, I dismissed it. After all, encountering fellow hikers in these remote areas wasn't unheard of, even if I hadn't anticipated meeting anyone so far from the main trail. However, as I approached, an unsettling feeling crept over me. The tent appeared to be in disarray, one side sagging, and the entrance flapping, torn. Then, stark against the green fabric, I spotted dark stains that could only be blood. My heart began to race and I called out. In the stillness of the night, I found myself drawn to the tent, driven by a flicker of hope that perhaps someone had been hurt and needed assistance. Yet only silence greeted my cautious approach. The blood trail led me inside, and with a deep breath, I steeled myself, peering into the dim interior. What I saw was a scene of chaos. Sleeping bags lay shredded, gear was scattered haphazardly, and blood stained the floor. But there was no body, no trace of the occupant who had once called this place home. I stumbled back, my mind swirling with questions. What had transpired here? Was it an animal attack? But if that were the case, where was the victim? That's when I noticed the footprints, human. They led away from the tent and into the dense forest, each step purposeful and evenly spaced, as if someone were calmly walking away from a crime scene. A chill ran down my spine as the implications settled in. This wasn't an animal attack. This was something much worse. I needed to get out of there fast. I turned to head back to my camp, planning to pack up and hike through the night if necessary. But as I spun around, movement caught my eye. Partially concealed behind a tree, about 50 yards away, a figure observed me. Our eyes locked for a fleeting moment before the figure vanished into the underbrush with an eerie swiftness. A wave of panic washed over me, and I sprinted away, no longer concerned with stealth or leaving traces. My sole focus was to return to my campsite, gather my belongings, and escape. I burst into my camp, breathless, my hands trembling as I fumbled to dismantle my tent, frequently glancing over my shoulder, convinced I would catch sight of that figure once more. As I hurriedly packed the last of my gear into my backpack, a figure seemed to materialize from the shadows of the trees. Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby, followed by another, closer this time. Someone was coming, and they were no longer attempting to be stealthy. With a surge of adrenaline, I slung my pack over my shoulder and took off, not bothering to search for the trail in the enveloping darkness. I chose a direction and plunged forward, pushing through branches and leaping over fallen logs. Behind me, I could hear the unmistakable sound of pursuit. Whoever it was, they moved with a speed and familiarity that suggested they knew these woods far better than I did. Did I run until my lungs burned, each breath feeling like fire in my chest? The sounds behind me never faded. If anything, they grew closer. In my panic, I lost all sense of direction, unaware of where I was or which way would lead me back to civilization. All I knew was that I had to keep moving. As I crashed through a thick patch of undergrowth, my foot caught on a root, and I went down hard, tumbling down a steep incline. I rolled and slid, unable to stop myself, branches whipping at my face and arms. Finally, I came to a stop. At the bottom of the hill, I lay there for a moment, dazed and winded. As I struggled to my feet, the realization hit me. I had lost my backpack in the fall. All my supplies, my map, my emergency beacon, gone. I was lost in the wilderness, in the middle of the night, being chased by who knows what. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm me, but then I heard it again. The sound of someone moving through the forest above me. My pursuer was still coming. Ignoring the pain from my fall, I started moving again, but now I was slower, more cautious. I couldn't risk making a sound. Another fall, and a part of me understood that running blindly would only lead me deeper into the unknown. As I navigated through the dark forest, my thoughts spiraled. Who was pursuing me? What had transpired at that campsite? Would I meet the same fate as whoever had occupied that blood-stained tent? Hours slipped away, or perhaps it was merely minutes. In the enveloping darkness, time lost all significance. My body ached from the fall and the relentless pace, yet I dared not pause. Just when I thought I could go no further, something caught my eye in the shadows. The trees whispered softly, a light faint but undeniably present. Hope surged through me, a fragile ember in the darkness. Civilization, safety. I quickened my pace, drawn toward that distant glow. As I drew nearer, the truth revealed itself. It was not a house or a streetlight, but a campfire flickering in the night. I hesitated, caught in a web of uncertainty. Was this my salvation, or was I stepping into the jaws of danger? Yet I was out of options, lost, injured, and the shadow of my pursuer loomed still. I had to take the risk. Slowly, cautiously, I approached the campfire, and as I neared, a figure emerged, seated by the flames, shrouded in the flickering light. In the heart of the forest, an old man sat by a flickering fire, his weathered face and long gray beard illuminated by the dancing flames. As I stumbled into the clearing, his eyes widened in surprise. "Good Lord, child," he said, his voice gravelly yet kind. "What happened to you?" The concern in his voice stirred something deep within me, and I collapsed by the fire, the events of the night spilling forth in a frantic rush, the bloody tent, the shadowy figure lurking in the woods, the frantic chase through the enveloping darkness. The old man listened intently, his expression growing grave as I spoke. When I finally fell silent, he nodded slowly, poking at the fire. "You're not the first," he murmured, as the flames crackled softly in the stillness of the night. With a stick in hand, I listened intently to the tales spun over the years about hikers who vanished in these woods. People often spoke of abandoned camps eerily similar to the one you mentioned. Most attributed the disappearances to animal attacks, perhaps bears, but I always sensed something more unsettling beneath the surface. He gazed at me, his eyes filled with a weighty seriousness. "You're fortunate to have found your way here," he said. "Whatever lurks out there keeps its distance from my camp. I don't know why, and I don't care to uncover the truth." As the night wore on, I sat by the old man's fire, every crackle and rustle making me jump, enveloped in the shadows of the unknown. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, a sound echoed from the depths of the forest. He offered me directions back to the ranger station, his voice steady yet laced with caution. "Be careful," he warned, as I readied myself to depart. "Just because the sun's up doesn't mean you're safe. Whatever's out there doesn't care about day or night." The journey back was fraught with tension. Every rustle in the underbrush made me flinch. Yet, I managed to reach the ranger station without incident. I recounted my experience, but the disbelief etched on their faces told me they were skeptical. They organized a search party, but they never found what I had encountered. Years have passed since that fateful night when I stumbled upon the bloody tent, yet the memories linger, haunting my dreams. In those shadows, I find myself sprinting through an endless dark forest, an ever-present feeling of something sinister lurking just behind me, its blood-stained hands reaching out. The thrill of hiking has faded, especially when alone, for the wilderness no longer holds its charm. I've come to understand a chilling truth that many never confront. Sometimes, the true monsters are not the creatures that roam the woods, but those who walk on two legs. Legs moved with a purpose that no ordinary creature could rival. So, if you find yourself wandering through the wilderness and stumble upon an abandoned campsite, or if an unsettling sensation creeps over you, as though unseen eyes are observing from the shadows of the trees, heed that instinct. It could very well be the difference between safety and peril. For in the depths of those dark woods, not all are there to revel in nature's beauty. Some are on the hunt, and you may find yourself becoming the hunted. The moment his hand encircled my wrist, a chilling realization washed over me. I had made a grave error, and what had begun as a night of adventure was spiraling into something far more sinister. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the festival that had promised music and freedom began to twist into something far more sinister. I felt an unsettling pull, drawing me deeper into the shadows with every fleeting moment. Anticipation had filled my heart for months, dreaming of Coachella, a 3-day escape from the ordinary, a celebration of rhythm and dance. I had saved diligently, secured my ticket, and persuaded my dear friends Olivia and Ethan to join me, envisioning the summer's pinnacle unfolding before us. The first day had been a dream, vibrant and alive, the atmosphere crackling with energy and sound, pulsing through my body, a sensation that made me feel more alive than I had in years. Olivia, Ethan, and I danced until our feet ached, laughed until our sides hurt, and marveled at the sea of people, all gathered for the same reason, to lose themselves in the music. It was during a set by my favorite DJ that things began to shift. The crowd was massive, everyone pressed together, moving as one to the thunderous beat. In the chaos, I found myself separated from Olivia and Ethan. At first, I wasn't too worried. We had agreed on a meeting spot for situations like this. I figured as I navigated through the throng, a sense of disorientation washed over me. The press of bodies felt almost suffocating. The music blared like a tempest, and the flashing lights danced erratically, adding to my confusion. Just then, a hand rested gently on my shoulder. I turned to find a young man, tall with dark hair and kind eyes, leaning in closer so I could hear him above the chaos. "You okay?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. "You look a little lost." I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for his concern. "I got separated from my friends," I yelled back, and he nodded in understanding, a reassuring presence amidst the whirlwind around us. "I can help you find them if you want. I'm Jacob, by the way." I hesitated for a moment. My parents had always warned me about strangers, but this was a music festival and everyone was a stranger here. Jacob seemed genuinely nice, and I reasoned we were surrounded by thousands of people. What could go wrong? "I'm Emily," I replied, "and yeah, that would be great. Thanks." Jacob took my hand to avoid losing me in the crowd. He said something reassuring and began leading me through the mass of dancing bodies. I noticed we were moving away from the main stage towards the outskirts of the... As we made our way through the festival grounds, I called out, my voice barely rising above the lively music. "Where are we going?" Jacob turned to me, his expression serious. "It's too crowded here. We'll have a better chance of spotting your friends from the hill over there." His words held a certain logic, so I followed him. As we distanced ourselves from the main crowd, the music faded into a distant thrum, and the vibrant festival lights dimmed, leaving us enveloped in a thick blanket of darkness. A tendril of unease began to curl in my stomach. "Maybe we should go back," I suggested, the thought of my friends searching for me creeping into my mind. Jacob's grip on my hand tightened just a little more. "Trust me," he insisted. That's when I noticed them. Two men lurking in the shadows near a cluster of trees. They straightened as we approached, and I caught the glint of a smile from one of them. It was not a friendly smile. Fear coursed through me like an electric current. I tried to pull my hand away, but Jacob's grip was unyielding. "Let go of me," I demanded, panic rising in my voice. Jacob turned to me, and the kindness I had seen earlier vanished from his eyes, replaced by something cold and unsettling. His voice was low and menacing as he leaned closer. "Don't make a scene. You wouldn't want to ruin everyone's good time, would you?" My mouth opened in a silent scream, but before I could utter a sound, one of the other men appeared behind me, a firm hand clamping over my mouth. I struggled, kicking and thrashing, but their strength was overwhelming. "Feisty one, isn't she?" The third man chuckled, a sinister delight in his tone. Terror washed over me. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not to me. They began to drag me toward a van I hadn't noticed before, lurking just beyond the shadows. As I approached the tree line, a wave of panic surged through me. Once they got me in that van, I knew it would be the end. I had to act, to do something, anything. In a moment of desperation, I went limp, allowing my weight to drop. It caught them off guard. The man holding me stumbled, his grip loosening just enough for me to break free. I ran, faster than I ever thought possible, my heart racing so fiercely I feared it might burst. Behind me, I could hear their shouts and the pounding of their footsteps on the grass. I screamed as I fled, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear me amidst the chaos. Distant music echoed in the night, a haunting melody that seemed to call for help. I dared to glance back, and there was Jacob, his face twisted in a mask of fury, closing in on me. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning and my legs screaming in protest. Suddenly, I burst through the tree line, finding myself at the edge of the festival. The lights, the noise, the throng of people. It all crashed over me like a wave of relief. "Help!" I cried out again, racing toward the nearest group, desperation fueling my steps. A security guard turned at the sound of my voice. Perhaps he recognized the terror etched on my face, or maybe he caught sight of the danger lurking behind me. He immediately started towards me, his hand reaching for his radio. I gasped for breath, tears streaming down my face. They tried to, couldn't get the words out. The guard put a protective arm around me, speaking rapidly into his radio. I turned to see Jacob and his friends skid to a stop at the edge of the crowd. For a moment, our eyes met, then they turned and melted back into the darkness. What followed was a blur. Police interviews, a trip to the hospital for a checkup, tearful reunions with Olivia. Ethan, I offered the most vivid descriptions I could muster of Jacob and the others, yet deep down, I understood the likelihood of finding them was minimal. They had orchestrated this, perhaps even practiced it before. The mere thought churned my stomach. The festival swirled around us, with music and laughter creating a surreal backdrop to the nightmare I had just endured. Olivia and Ethan were eager to leave at once, but something anchored me to the spot. I felt compelled to see it through, to ensure they didn't rob me of this experience entirely. For the remainder of the weekend, I remained close to my friends, flinching at every flicker of shadow that danced in the corners of my vision. As I gazed into the sea of faces, a familiar figure seemed to flicker in the shadows. Jacob. The sensation of Fan Jacob's hands reaching for me lingered. Yet as the hours drifted by and the melodies enveloped us, a different feeling began to emerge. Strength. Resilience. I had confronted the darkness and emerged unscathed, having fought back and found my way to safety. On that final night of the festival, as the last act graced the stage, I stood alongside Olivia and Ethan, our arms intertwined. The music swelled like a tide around us, and I felt the warmth of tears on my cheeks. Not tears of fear or sorrow, but tears of relief and gratitude for having made it through the night. With a sense of determination, I understood that the path before me would be fraught with challenges. Nightmares would haunt me, therapy sessions would be necessary, and there would be days when fear threatened to engulf me. Yet, in that moment, surrounded by thousands of souls united by the power of music, I made a promise to myself. I would not allow this experience to define me. I would not let Jacob and those like him emerge victorious. As the last notes faded and the crowd erupted in cheers, I joined in, not just for the music, but for my own strength, my survival, and my future. The Coachella Music Festival was not the carefree experience I had envisioned. Instead, it was the crucible that forged a stronger version of myself, a version that understood the world's dangers yet stood resolute against them. This version, while more cautious, learned to cherish every fleeting moment of joy and freedom. Now, when the songs from that weekend drift into my ears, I recall not only the fear but also the strength I discovered, the friends who stood by my side, and the kindness of strangers who came to my aid. I dance not in spite of what transpired, but because of it. Every beat, every note, every fleeting moment of joy stands as a quiet victory against those who sought to steal it away. So, if you find yourself at a festival or in a bustling crowd, and you notice someone who appears lost or uneasy, take a moment to reach out. Your simple act of kindness could be the thin line between a night filled with laughter and a shadow that lingers for a lifetime. You never know when you might find yourself in need of that same kindness. The instant I caught sight of my own reflection in the collection of photographs on his coffee table, a realization washed over me. What began as a simple online purchase soon spiraled into a haunting experience that would linger in my mind for years. It all started with a vintage guitar, a treasure I had been seeking for months, scouring online marketplaces and secondhand shops in search of the perfect addition to my collection. Then, I came across a listing for a 1967 Fender Les Paul in cherry red. My heart raced at the sight. It felt like fate. The price was steep, yet reasonable for such a rare gem. The seller, a man named Jackson, boasted excellent reviews, and I felt a sense of assurance as I moved forward. There was a sense of familiarity in the air, as if the conversation about vintage instruments had woven a delicate thread between us. For days, we exchanged messages, delving into the guitar's rich history and its current condition. Jackson, with his friendly demeanor, even suggested a face-to-face meeting, allowing me the chance to inspect the guitar before making a decision. It felt almost too perfect, and yet my excitement began to blur my judgment. We settled on a quaint coffee shop for our rendezvous. I arrived early, cradling an overpriced latte, my heart racing with anticipation. When Jackson finally entered, guitar case in hand, a wave of relief washed over me, mingling with the thrill of the moment. He appeared perfectly ordinary, just like any other person you might meet on a quiet afternoon. In the mid-40s, with an average height and build, he wore a friendly smile that instantly put me at ease. The guitar before me was everything I had hoped for and more. The wear on the fretboard whispered tales of countless gigs played, while the paint had faded to a perfect vintage patina. As I strummed a chord, the sound was pure magic, and I found myself falling in love. We completed the transaction right there in the coffee shop, and as I handed over the cash, Jackson's hand lingered on mine for just a moment too long. I brushed it off as nothing, too captivated by my new acquisition to pay it much mind. "Much mind, enjoy it," Jackson said as we parted ways. I should have noticed the odd emphasis he placed on those words, but I was too busy imagining myself playing this beautiful instrument to pay attention to the warning signs. The next few days were a blur of joy. I spent every free moment playing the guitar, marveling at its tone, and the way it felt in my hands. I even started writing a new song inspired by my new musical companion. It was about a week after the purchase that I first noticed something. As I made my way home from work, an unsettling feeling crept over me, as if unseen eyes were following my every step. I turned to glance behind, but the street lay empty, yet that eerie sensation clung to me. Later that night, I could have sworn I spotted a shadowy figure across the street, gazing up at my apartment window. But just as quickly as I noticed them, they vanished into the darkness. I tried to dismiss it, attributing my unease to the flickering streetlights playing tricks on my mind. The following day, a message from an unknown number arrived, reading, "Hope you're enjoying the guitar. It sounds beautiful when you play." A chill ran down my spine. Chill ran down my spine. How did this person know I was playing? And how did they get my number? I tried to convince myself it was just Jackson following up on the sale, but something about the message felt off. I replied, asking who it was, but no response came. Over the next few weeks, the strange occurrences escalated. More texts from unknown numbers, always commenting on things I'd done or places I'd been. I started noticing the same car parked on my street day after day. Once, I could have sworn I saw someone duck behind a... As I stepped out of my apartment, a peculiar sensation began to envelop me, one that felt like the very threads of my sanity were fraying. An unsettling awareness crept in, as if unseen eyes were tracing my every movement. I found myself abandoning my guitar, convinced that it somehow intertwined with the strange occurrences. Then the photographs arrived. Mysterious images slipped into my mailbox. They captured me in the midst of my everyday life. At work, in the grocery store, sharing laughter with friends, all taken from afar, unbeknownst to me. With each new snapshot, a chilling dread settled deeper within me. This was no mere figment of my imagination anymore. There was a time when I felt the weight of shadows creeping closer, a sensation that someone was watching me. I sought help from the police, but without tangible proof of a threat. Their hands were tied. They took my report, advising me to keep a record of any further occurrences. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of helplessness and isolation. Then, one fateful night, everything escalated. I lay in bed, frozen, as a noise outside my window pierced the stillness. My heart raced as I recognized the unmistakable sound of someone attempting to pry open the lock. In a surge of panic, I whispered urgently to the 911 operator. The police arrived swiftly, their sirens slicing through the night, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. On a quiet night, I heard the sound of running footsteps, followed by an eerie silence. Gathering my courage, I peered outside, only to find the street empty, save for a few police cars. Yet, on my windowsill lay a single red guitar pick. The officer took my statement, dusted for prints, and assured me that patrols would be increased in the area. But deep down, we all understood that it wouldn't be enough. Whoever was behind this was patient and methodical. They wouldn't be easily deterred. In a moment of desperation, I resolved to confront Jackson, the only connection I could think of, the starting point of this unsettling mystery. In the dim light of the coffee shop, I found myself drawn back into a familiar yet unsettling encounter. I had reached out to him, and to my surprise, he had agreed to meet. Jackson sat across from me, looking just as I remembered, but there was something different about him now. His once warm smile had taken on a chilling edge, a predatory glint that sent shivers down my spine. I steadied my voice, trying to mask the tremor of fear. "I know it's you," I said, confronting him with the weight of the texts and photos that haunted me. "Why are you doing this?" His smile remained, unyielding and unnerving. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, his tone laced with a feigned concern that only deepened my unease. "Are you feeling all right?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats, as I realized the game had only just begun. "Hist," he said, "I'll go to the police," but Jackson interrupted, his voice suddenly hard. "Tell them the man who sold you a guitar is stalking you? Without proof? Be careful with accusations like that. They can get a person in trouble." The threat was clear. I left the coffee shop shaken, no closer to answers, but now certain of Jackson's involvement. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every car passing outside had me on edge. Around 2 a.m., the darkness felt heavier, as if it were whispering secrets I dared not uncover. I heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in my front door lock. A wave of unease washed over me. My phone was in my hand, poised to call for help, while my eyes darted around, searching for something to defend myself with. There, leaning against the wall, was my guitar. I seized it, gripping it tightly as if it were a shield. The door creaked open, and a figure emerged from the shadows. "I told you I'd be seeing you around," came Jackson's voice, low and familiar. In that moment, doubt clouded my mind, and I swung the guitar with all my strength. A sickening crunch echoed through the room as it struck Jackson's head, and he crumpled to the floor. I stood there, trembling, the shattered remains of my guitar still clutched in my hands, as Jackson lay motionless before me. There I sat, motionless on my floor, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911 for the second time that week. What unfolded next was a haze of police interviews, legal proceedings, and therapy sessions. The chilling truth about Jackson's obsession emerged. He had been stalking not only me, but also several other musicians who had purchased instruments from him. My apartment became a repository of evidence. Photos, notes, and meticulous logs of my daily routines. In the end, Jackson was sentenced to prison, leaving me to gather the fragments of my life. The vintage Les Paul, the very object that... It all began with an object that was held as evidence for months, returned to me when I could no longer bear to look at it. I decided to donate it to a music school, hoping it would bring joy to someone else, free from the dark memories that clung to it. Years have passed since that night, yet the effects linger. I find myself checking over my shoulder as I walk down the street, triple-checking my locks each night. The thought of buying anything online now comes with a thorough vetting process. The experience changed me, instilling a sense of caution and awareness of the potential lurking in the shadows. In the shadows of seemingly innocent interactions, dangers can quietly linger, revealing not only the perils but also the strength within oneself. I found my way back to the guitar, a journey that took time, yet now, each strum resonates with defiance. It's not merely the love of music that drives me. It's a testament to survival, a melody that whispers of resilience against fear. So, should you find yourself navigating the world of online purchases, especially those that lead to face-to-face encounters. Tread carefully. Trust your instincts, for sometimes the unseen can be more telling than the obvious. The most perilous predators often lurk behind a friendly smile and an offer that seems too good to be true. One can never anticipate when a seemingly innocent purchase might spiral into a struggle for safety, sanity, and even life itself. The moment I noticed the blinking red light in the corner of the bedroom, I understood that my tranquil escape had morphed into a living nightmare. Little did I know, this revelation was merely the start of a chilling game of cat and mouse that would test my very limits. I had been eagerly anticipating this cabin retreat. For months, after a grueling year at work, I longed for solitude to decompress and recharge. Then, I stumbled upon a listing for a secluded cabin in the woods, and it felt like fate. The photos depicted a cozy interior, a wraparound porch offering a stunning view of the mountains, and, best of all, no Wi-Fi or cell service. A true escape from the world. The drive up was enchanting, winding through forests that were just beginning to show the first hints of fall color. As I arrived at the cabin, I could feel the stress of the past year starting to melt away, enveloping me in a sense of peace and anticipation. Everything the listing had promised and more, rustic yet comfortable, with a well-stocked kitchen and a fireplace that seemed to beckon for chilly evenings. I spent the first day hiking, exploring the trails that wound around the property. The silence was intoxicating, broken only by the gentle sounds of birds and the soft crunch of leaves beneath my boots. That night, I prepared a simple dinner and nestled in front of the fire with a book, feeling more relaxed than I had in years. However, it was on the second night that an unsettling feeling began to creep in as I prepared for the evening ahead. As I settled in for the night, a peculiar sight caught my eye, a tiny red light blinking steadily in the corner of the bedroom. Initially, I dismissed it as a smoke detector, but as I approached, a chill crept over me. It was a camera. Questions flooded my mind. How long had it been there? Who had placed it? And most chilling of all, who was watching? In a frenzy, I searched the rest of the cabin, my heart racing. I discovered 2 more cameras, one cleverly disguised as a knot in the wooden beams of the living room, and another hidden within the heating vent of the bathroom. The unsettling realization settled in, wrapping around me like a cold fog. There was a sense of unease that wrapped around me like a heavy fog, as if unseen eyes were tracing my every movement. It left me feeling exposed, vulnerable in the stillness of the night. The urge to flee surged within me, to leap into my car and drive far away, but the treacherous road down the mountain loomed in my mind, a daunting path even in the light of day. I was ensnared, at least until the dawn broke. Sleep eluded me, and I found myself in the living room, a kitchen knife gripped tightly in my hand, every creak and groan of the old cabin sending shivers down my spine. As the first light of morning began to seep through the windows, a resolve took root within me. I would not be a victim. I was determined to take charge of my fate. To uncover the truth and seek retribution, I began my task by disabling the cameras, carefully covering them with duct tape I discovered in a kitchen drawer. With a sense of purpose, I delved deeper into the cabin, meticulously searching for any clues that might reveal its owner. In the study, I stumbled upon a desk cluttered with a stack of old papers, mostly mundane utility bills and renovation receipts. Yet, at the bottom of the pile lay something that sent a chill down my spine, a notebook filled with handwritten entries. As I flipped through its pages, a growing sense of dread enveloped me, for I realized what it contained. Within the pages lay intricate accounts of past visitors, their actions, their meals, even snippets of hushed dialogues. This was not mere curiosity. It was something far more unsettling. As I absorbed this chilling revelation, a sound pierced the stillness, sending a shiver down my spine. A car arriving outside the cabin. The realization struck me. The orchestrator of this eerie tale had arrived. Panic surged through me. Should I confront this unknown presence, seek refuge, or make a desperate escape. Ultimately, instinct prevailed. I snatched the notebook and fled upstairs, finding solace in a closet just as the front door creaked open. Footsteps echoing ominously in the silence echoed through the cabin, slow and deliberate. I could hear someone moving from room to room, pausing occasionally to check the cameras. It dawned on me that they knew something was wrong. "Come out! Come out! Wherever you are," a voice called, sickeningly playful. "I know you're here. I saw you find my little toys." I held my breath, trying to make myself as small as possible in the cramped closet. The footsteps grew closer, coming up the stairs. I gripped the knife tighter, my palms slick with sweat. The bedroom door opened, and I could, through a narrow crack in the closet door, I caught a glimpse of the room. A man stepped inside, tall and lean, his face bearing a hint of handsomeness, marred only by the chilling, predatory gleam in his eyes. "You're a clever one, aren't you?" he remarked, his voice reverberating softly in the stillness. "But this is my game, and I know all the hiding spots." He advanced toward the closet, and I felt a surge of tension, bracing myself to fight for my life. Just as his hand reached for the door, a miracle occurred. A phone rang. Not mine, of course. I had left it in the car, rendered useless without service. He paused, pulling out a cell phone, snapping it open. He listened intently for a moment, his expression shifting to one of darkness. "No, not now. I'm in the middle of..." "Fine, fine. I'll be there in an hour." With a curse, he ended the call and surveyed the room one last time. "Don't go anywhere," he said, his voice laced with a chilling promise. "I'll be back to finish our game." I listened as he stormed out of the cabin, the roar of a car engine erupting outside. Only when the sound had faded completely did I allow myself to breathe. I knew there was a fleeting moment, a whisper of urgency, that beckoned me to act. I hurried down the stairs, my heart pounding, and dashed to my car. My hands trembled, fumbling with the key as I inserted it into the ignition. With a surge of adrenaline, I sped down the winding mountain road, thoughts swirling like leaves in a storm. The local police felt like a trap. Who knew what shadows lingered there? I needed distance, a sanctuary far from the familiar. Hours slipped by as I drove, never daring to pause, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, searching for any hint of danger. Only after crossing 2 state lines did I finally allow myself a moment of respite, pulling over at a rest stop, the weight of tension slowly lifting. As the adrenaline faded, the reality of the situation settled heavily upon me. I found myself in my car, tears streaming down my face, engulfed by a whirlwind of fear, relief, and a sense of violation that lingered like a shadow. Once I gathered my thoughts, a sense of purpose emerged within me. I drove to the nearest FBI field office, determined to share everything: the story, the notebook, the photos I had taken of the hidden cameras. The agents listened intently, their expressions serious, promising me that they would investigate thoroughly. In the weeks that followed, the true extent of the horror began to unfold, revealing the identity of the man whose real name I had yet to uncover. He had been playing his twisted game for years, weaving a web of fear across dozens of cabins and claiming hundreds of victims. Some he merely observed, while the FBI remained vague about others. Yet the haunted expressions on the agents' faces revealed all I needed to understand. They eventually apprehended him, and my evidence played a crucial role in his downfall. Yet the triumph felt empty. I still flinched at shadows, waking in the night drenched in cold sweat, haunted by the thought of unseen eyes lurking in the darkness. I could no longer bear the confines of my apartment. Everywhere I turned, I imagined hidden cameras watching my every move. In a new city, I began the slow process of starting over, healing from the past. Yet, I found myself avoiding vacation rentals, places where I felt I couldn't maintain control. That persistent feeling, a whisper of unease, never truly left me. Years have slipped by, and on most days, I can nearly forget the shadows of what transpired. But in the stillness of a quiet room, I sometimes hear the distant echo of a camera shutter, and in those moments, the fear floods back, vivid and raw, as if it were just yesterday in that cabin. I share my tale now, a gentle reminder for others to heed the signs that linger in the dark corners of our minds. The world can indeed be a treacherous realm, where malevolence lurks behind the most charming exteriors. Yet it also reveals the strength within us to endure, to resist, and to take back our lives. So, when you find yourself in unfamiliar surroundings and a sense of unease washes over you, heed that instinct. Do not allow courtesy or discomfort to silence your inquiries or shield you from safeguarding your well-being. For you never know when a seemingly idyllic getaway might spiral into a chilling ordeal. In this delicate dance of predator and prey, it is always wiser to embody the hunter. I still remember the first time I heard those piercing screams. As the sounds drifted in from next door, I reassured myself it was merely the television. By the third night, however, a chilling realization settled in. I was living beside a monster. Little did I know how deep the rabbit hole of horror truly ran. I had only been in my new apartment for a week when the unsettling occurrences began. The building, old and a bit run down, was all I could afford on my entry-level salary. My neighbor, a middle-aged man named Oliver, had seemed friendly enough upon my arrival, even lending a hand with a few boxes as I made my way up the stairs. "Welcome to the building," he had said, a smile on his face, unaware of the shadows that lurked just beyond the walls. With a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he assured me, "I'm sure you'll love it here." Those words would linger in my mind, casting shadows in the weeks that followed. It was a Tuesday night when I first heard it, a muffled scream, abruptly silenced. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, straining to catch any sound in the enveloping darkness. But all that greeted me was an unsettling silence. I tried to convince myself it was merely a nightmare or perhaps someone's television blaring too loudly. Reluctantly, I drifted back to sleep, uneasy yet unwilling to entertain darker thoughts. The following night, it happened again, and this time I was certain I wasn't dreaming. The scream was unmistakable, filled with terror and pain. It seemed to be coming from the apartment next door. I pressed my ear against the wall, listening intently. I heard shuffling, a thud, then silence. My hand hovered over my phone, 911 already dialed, but what would I say? That I heard a scream? That my neighbor might be doing something suspicious? It seemed ridiculous in the quiet of the night. I deleted the numbers, telling myself I'd talk to Oliver in the morning. Maybe he was just having nightmares. But when I encountered Oliver the following day, he appeared just as he always did, a picture of normalcy. He offered a slight nod as we crossed paths in the hallway, that same peculiar smile lingering on his lips. A question danced on the tip of my tongue, yearning to escape about the unsettling noises, yet it remained trapped, caught in the web of my uncertainty. What if I was mistaken? What if my mind was simply playing tricks on me? As night fell, I found myself listening intently, my ears attuned to the stillness, waiting for any sound that might break the silence around 2 a.m. It was not a scream that pierced the night, but rather a series of thumps, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Then came the sound of a door slamming. I moved cautiously to my window, just in time to catch a glimpse of Oliver loading something large and unwieldy into the trunk of his car, illuminated by the dim glow of the streetlight. In that fleeting moment, I could have sworn I saw a hand dangling limply from whatever he was carrying. A chill ran through me. This was no mere figment of my imagination. I called the police, my voice trembling as I recounted the unsettling scene. They assured me they would send someone to investigate. Yet, I could sense the doubt woven into the dispatcher's voice. By the time they arrived, Oliver's car had vanished. The officers knocked on his door, but silence greeted them. They posed a few questions to me, yet without solid proof, their hands were tied. They advised me to reach out again if anything else peculiar caught my attention. That night, and the one that followed, sleep eluded me. Each sound sent a shiver down my spine, and every shadow appeared to conceal unfathomable terrors. In my restless state, I began to scour the internet for any trace of Oliver, hoping to uncover something that might validate my fears. There were whispers of doubt, for he was but a ghost, a shadow without a trace on social media or in public records. Beyond the simple act of renewing a driver's license, it felt as though he had never truly existed. A week drifted by in silence, and I began to question my own mind. Perhaps the stress of moving and starting a new job had woven a tapestry of illusions. Just as I began to find my footing, the air shifted once more. This time, the scream pierced the stillness, louder and more urgent, echoing from the apartment above mine. My heart raced as I ascended the stairs, the door to that apartment slightly ajar, beckoning me closer. I pushed the door open, calling out, "Hello? Is everyone okay?" What I saw next will linger in my mind forever. The apartment was devoid of furniture, the floors draped in plastic sheeting, and there, in the center of the room, stood Oliver. He loomed over a young woman bound to a chair, a knife gripped tightly in his hand. As our eyes met, Oliver's widened in surprise, while the woman's were filled with a desperate hope. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to freeze around us. Then, without warning, Oliver lunged at me. I can't recall making the choice to fight. One moment I was standing there, and the next, in the dim light of the room, a struggle unfolded. I found myself grappling with Oliver, the blade glinting dangerously close to my throat. We crashed into the walls, the sound of shattering lamps echoing in the tense air. Adrenaline surged through me, fueled by fear. In a moment of desperation, I managed to knee him in the groin, and he doubled over, gasping. Seizing the chance, I reached for a nearby lamp, swinging it with all my strength. It connected with a sickening thud, and Oliver crumpled to the ground, breathless. I rushed to the woman, my hands trembling as I quickly untied her. "Run," I gasped, urgency lacing my words. Without hesitation, she bolted for the door, her escape a swift blur in the chaos. In the stillness of the apartment, I could hear her footsteps echoing down the stairs, each thud resonating with a sense of urgency. I turned back to Oliver, intent on ensuring he remained hidden until the police arrived, but he was nowhere to be found. A chilling trail of blood led to the open window, and I rushed over, peering out just in time to catch a glimpse of him slipping away down the fire escape. The police arrived mere minutes later, but it was too late. Oliver had vanished into the night. What followed was a haunting sequence of police interviews, crime scene investigations, and unsettling revelations. The plastic-covered apartment was just the beginning. There were 3 others, each shrouded in mystery. In a quiet town, a chilling tale began to unfold. Buildings, all rented under false names, whispered secrets of unspeakable horrors. Oliver, or so I thought, was not who he seemed. His true identity was Mason Parker, a man sought after for a series of disappearances that spanned 3 states. The woman I had rescued was merely his latest victim, a tragic addition to a long list. As the weeks passed, the full scope of his dark deeds emerged. Bodies were unearthed in the woods just outside of town, while trophies of his sinister past lay concealed within the very walls of his apartment. And then there were the videos, haunting remnants of his twisted mind, which I could not bring myself to watch. As I observed the detectives, their haunted expressions spoke volumes, revealing the weight of the night that had unfolded. I knew then that I could no longer remain in the apartment. Each creak and shadow whispered reminders of that fateful evening. Seeking solace, I moved in with a friend while I searched for a new home, my heart racing at every unexpected sound. Eventually, Mason Parker was apprehended while attempting to cross the border into Mexico. The trial became a spectacle, a media frenzy that I could hardly bear. I found myself on the stand, forced to recount that night in agonizing detail. Seeing him in the courtroom, his eyes devoid of warmth, sent a chill through me, a stark reminder of the darkness that lingered just beyond the light. The proximity to danger still lingers in my mind, a shadow that never fully dissipates. He was sentenced to life in prison, a fate that should have brought me peace, yet the unease remains. I often find myself contemplating the countless others who might lurk in the guise of kindness, their intentions masked by friendly smiles and helpful gestures. Years have passed, and I have worked diligently to reconstruct my existence. My new apartment stands in a secure building, surrounded by neighbors and fortified by a state-of-the-art security system. Therapy has guided me through the labyrinth of my thoughts, equipping me with tools to navigate the echoes of PTSD and anxiety. Yet, the whispers of the past still echo softly in the corners of my mind, reminding me that safety is a fragile illusion. There are moments that linger in the shadows of our minds, moments that compel us to check the locks thrice before surrendering to sleep. The heart races at the faintest echo of a scream in the stillness of the night, a reminder that instincts should never be dismissed. I share this tale not just as a cautionary whisper, but to illuminate the truth that darkness can wear a familiar face. Yet, within that darkness, there lies a spark of resilience, a testament to the strength we possess to confront the unknown. So, when you find yourself in the grip of unease, listen closely to the whispers of your intuition. As the night deepens, it's wise not to simply turn over and drift back into slumber. One mustn't dismiss the quiet, for sometimes the line between life and death, between rescuing a soul or losing one, hinges on the courage to act. Remember, the most perilous creatures often lurk in plain sight, just next door. It was at that haunting hour of 2 a.m. that I first laid eyes on the unmarked van as it rolled up to the loading dock. It was a night like any other, a quiet shift at Apex Tech where the fluorescent lights buzzed softly in the stillness. I had been a night security guard for 6 months, and the routine had settled into a monotonous rhythm. My rounds were filled with the echo of my footsteps in the empty halls, a lullaby that almost lulled me to sleep. Yet, beneath that calm surface, an unsettling feeling began to stir within me, hinting that something was amiss. Little did I know, this seemingly mundane night was on the brink of transforming into a harrowing struggle for survival, unveiling a conspiracy that lurked in the shadows, far beyond my wildest fears. I arrived at the hour when the night deepens, just as the clock struck 10. I nodded to the day shift guard as he departed, preparing myself for another uneventful 8 hours. My first round began at 11 o'clock, and I noted nothing out of the ordinary. The labs were locked up tight, the server room secure, everything as it should be. It was in the stillness of the night, the clock strikes 2. As I strolled past a window that offered a view of the rear parking lot, an unsettling scene began to unfold. A white van approached the loading dock, which struck me as peculiar for 2 reasons. We rarely receive deliveries at such a late hour, and all company vehicles bore the unmistakable markings of our brand. This van, however, was devoid of any insignia. I observed 3 men emerge from the vehicle, clad in what appeared to be maintenance uniforms. Yet, there was something disquieting about their demeanor. They moved with an unsettling purpose, their heads constantly swiveling as if they were on the lookout for unseen eyes. My instincts urged me to report this strange occurrence. My supervisor, but as I reached for my radio, I hesitated. What if this was some kind of authorized late-night maintenance? I didn't want to cause a fuss over nothing and risk losing my job. Instead, I decided to investigate further. I made my way down to the loading dock, trying to look casual while my heart pounded in my chest. As I got closer, I could hear the men talking in low, urgent voices. "Got to be quick, in and out in 10 minutes tops," one was saying. "What if the guards show up?" another asked. "Take care of them," the first replied. At first, a chill swept through the air as I received a cold reply, my blood turning to ice. This was certainly not a sanctioned maintenance task. I began to retreat slowly, my mind racing to find a phone and call for help. But in my anxious state, I stumbled over a stack of empty boxes, the crash resonating through the stillness of the night. Suddenly, their heads snapped in my direction. "Hey, you there! Stop!" one of them shouted. In that moment, I ran, faster than I had ever run before. Sprinting back into the building, the sound of their footsteps pounding relentlessly behind me. I knew I couldn't stop now. To escape them forever, I needed a plan. I ducked into one of the research labs, my heart racing as I searched for a place to hide. That's when I noticed it. A laptop, its screen glowing softly in the darkness. Without a second thought, I rushed over. The computer belonged to Dr. Emily Lee, one of Glenwood's top researchers, and it was open to a folder labeled Project Blacklight. My curiosity momentarily eclipsed my fear, and I began scrolling through the files. What I discovered sent a chill through my veins. Schematics for what appeared to be advanced weapons. As I sifted through the records, a sense of unease settled over me. There were massive off-the-books payments, and most chilling of all, a list of names, politicians, military officials, corporate executives, each accompanied by notes that hinted at their susceptibility to persuasion. A realization dawned upon me, growing more unsettling by the moment. I had stumbled upon something monumental. Apex was not merely a tech company. It was the heart of a vast conspiracy. Just then, the sound of approaching footsteps jolted me back to the present. There was no time to fully comprehend what I had uncovered. I had to get this information out. My eyes fell upon a USB drive resting on the desk, a glimmer of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. As I hurriedly copied the files, the door suddenly burst open just as the transfer finished. I quickly yanked out the USB drive and dove under the desk, heart racing, as the men entered the room. "Check everywhere," one of them growled, his voice low and menacing. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't discover my hiding place as they searched the lab. Time stretched on, feeling like an eternity, until they finally moved on to the next room. The moment the coast was clear, I crawled out from my refuge and made a break for it, managing to reach the security area just in time. In the quiet confines of my office, I found myself locked away, my hands trembling as I grappled with the weight of my thoughts. The police felt like a distant option, shrouded in uncertainty. Who could say if they were part of this tangled web? My mind raced, searching for a beacon of trust amidst the shadows. Then, a flicker of memory emerged. A journalist who had ventured into Glenwood not long ago, probing into the depths of government contracts. The company had silenced him with a heavy hand, but perhaps he would be intrigued by the secrets I had uncovered. With a sense of urgency, I navigated to the local newspaper's website on my phone, my fingers dancing across the screen as I sought out his email, ready to reach out into the unknown. As I sent a message, attaching some files from the USB drive, a sudden loud bang echoed against the security office door. "Open up. We know you're in there." Panic surged through me, and I glanced around, desperately seeking an escape route. My eyes landed on the ventilation duct. It would be a tight fit, but it was my only option. Just as I squeezed into the duct, the door burst open. I held my breath, peering through the grate as the men began their search. "He's gone," one of them declared, but he was definitely here. "Look, With the computer still aglow, I felt the weight of the email logs pressing down on me. Another order had come through, and I feared he might have sent something revealing. My heart sank at the thought. They would surely know I had reached out to the journalist. A sense of urgency washed over me as I began to crawl through the narrow ventilation system, trying to recall the building's layout. After what seemed like an eternity of cramped movements, I finally emerged into an empty office. Climbing out, my muscles protested, aching from the strain. I found myself on the third floor, with no straightforward way down. and the sound of approaching voices echoed ominously in the hallway. In a moment of desperation, I smashed the... With a gentle rustle, I found myself at the window, a chair beneath me as I stepped out onto the narrow ledge. The ground seemed to stretch away, impossibly distant, yet my car glimmered in the parking lot, a beacon of hope. I carefully inched along the ledge, forcing myself not to glance down. As I reached the building's corner, a drain pipe caught my eye. It was a perilous choice, but it was my only chance. I grasped the pipe, beginning my descent, the rough metal biting into my hands. Halfway down, the pipe groaned under my weight, and before I could brace myself, it tore free from the wall. I plummeted, landing with a jarring thud on the dumpster below, a sharp pain radiating through me. Through my body, yet adrenaline propelled me forward. I rolled off the dumpster and limped as swiftly as I could toward my car. Shouts echoed behind me as I sped out of the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, the white van loomed ominously in pursuit. What ensued was the most harrowing car chase I had ever experienced. I navigated the desolate early morning streets, the van ever close behind. At last, I evaded them by darting through a construction site, narrowly escaping disaster on several occasions. When I finally felt certain I was no longer being followed, I made my way toward the... In the dimly lit newspaper office, I felt a weight on my shoulders, knowing I had to ensure the journalist received my urgent message. The following weeks unfolded like a haunting tale, filled with police interviews, FBI investigations, and a whirlwind of media attention. The files I had taken revealed a dark conspiracy, one that entwined defense contracts, illegal weapons development, and the shadowy threads of political manipulation. As arrests were made and companies shuttered, the tremors of this revelation reached the highest echelons of government and industry. I was celebrated as a whistleblower, a hero in the eyes of many, yet beneath the surface, the story held an unsettling chill. As the events played out in the national news, a lingering unease settled within me, a whisper that the story was far from finished. Somewhere in the shadows, the true architects of Project Blacklight were surely observing, biding their time, plotting their next move. My instincts, it seemed, were justified. 3 months after that fateful night, an attempt was made on my life, thrusting me into the protective embrace of witness protection. Now, I find myself perpetually glancing over my shoulder, never lingering too long in one place. At times, I ponder whether the choices I made were wise, if the pursuit of truth was worth the toll it has taken on my life and my peace of mind. Yet, the shadows remain, and the story continues to unfold. Then I recall the weapons, the lists of names, the enormity of their plans. I understand that, regardless of the personal toll, revealing the truth was the only path I could take. So, if you find yourself on a tedious night shift and notice something amiss, don't brush it off. Don't convince yourself it's nothing, for sometimes the most ordinary job can transform into the very front lines of a struggle between good and evil. In that fleeting moment, you might just be the solitary guardian standing between the truth and the shadows.